Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lost-Plaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. And how are we doing today? Oh my, have we got a show? I don't know what else to say about it. We've got a show. Things are happening in the world. Things are happening in the big world, right? Of course, that's what we talk about most of the time. But sometimes things happen in this little world of the internet, and this particular little world of internet commentary and shit posting and all of that. And we are going to dive into it today, guys. We've got, well, here's a preview. Here's a preview of what we're going to talk about in a little bit. This will be starting in a bit. This is going to be a heavily discussed topic tonight. In fact, we will be going through all 15 minutes of this very well done video by Just Some Guy. I will give background on it, and I will address it point by point. It will be an EFAP, this 15-minute video. I expect to take about an hour long to go through. Hopefully not longer, but we need some surrounding context to it. We have some other video clips to discuss that are going to be necessary for the video. It requires a thorough and measured response. Now, I'll say it now and I'll say it again. There are a couple types of internet discourse that exist. One of them is the kayfabe-filled, how do I word this? The blood sports style of discussion and debate, which is performative over functional. Right? It's the idea of everybody calling each other R words and F slurs and yelling and screaming, and the audience really, really gets into it and really enjoys it. Blood sports was a lot of fun for the audience for quite a while. And so sometimes when you get into an argument online, you engage in that sort of behavior and that activity because, let's be honest, it's fun for the creators too to get in there and throw scraps, which is what I engaged in, and I believe Just Some Guy engaged in on FlashCast on Saturday. And then what followed on, and I talked about this on Sunday and Monday, and like I've talked about this several times. I'm not making any bones about this, but I felt that the conversation between Just Some Guy and I were useful in furthering the discussions on liberty. And so I have talked about it and brought it up since. He is rightfully responding to that. And I have no criticisms or beef with him doing that. Of course, that is the other side of internet debate, right? You have the blood sport side, which is very performative and fun and screamy. And then you have the other side of debate, which is measured and rational and tends to be a little less screamy. However, some people have this ability to confuse calmness of delivery with rationality, deliberation, and logical reasoning. That is not always true. And I think we may be able to demonstrate that today as we go through this video. So Just Some Guy has responded, and I will be responding in kind, and we will be discussing some of these issues because I take umbrage with some of his points. So we'll do that. Then we'll also, who knows what'll happen after or during the disassembly. I know how I want to do things, but I don't always know how they'll turn out. But we will be going through that. I'm going to start it in a little bit. I want to give people time to filter in. get some stuff out of the way. After that, we will be discussing Melinda Scott. Melinda Scott has, since our last update of Melinda Scott, there have been 2 new filings. One of them is her response to the motion that Josh's lawyer has filed for an extension of time to for the appeal bond. That's what I mean, for the appeal bond. And so we need to go ahead and dive into, read, explore Melinda Scott's filing and Josh's attorney's response, because I think those are useful. So we've got some, we'll do it some debate, I guess, to start. And then we will go ahead and do the, the white balance on this camera. Every time I look at it, it's shifting. It's like it knows me. So yeah, we will do the debate stuff, and then we will jump into the Melinda stuff. And I also just want to point out, there's, you hate to see it. There's a tragedy going on in the North. There's a tragedy going on in the North. It's an absolute catastrophe. It's a Titanic level disaster, and there's so many people that are lost and confused and don't know what to do. And I don't know how else to say it, but it's been a very bad breakup. A very bad breakup of a wonderful homosexual couple. And it's, you hate to see it. You really hate to see it happen. They were a couple of beautiful gay men who were here to save the white Christian race. And it's just weird that it turns out that it was all based on literally nothing, because they're actually just useless louts that give Asperger's afflicted individuals a bad name. Oh, and one of them shits all over his toilet and the other one had to clean it up all the time. So, I mean, just that though, but it's really a sad thing to see. I mean, you hate to see it happen. You hate to see it happen. They could have saved the white Western man, and it's shocking that never employed single unkempt, fat, unhealthy autisms on the internet just weren't the vehicle for deliverance from this evil. I didn't know, who could have seen it coming? Who could have seen that reality coming, that 2 people who live in squalor and spend their time just inhaling beer after beer without doing any, who would have known? They weren't here to save humanity. Despite all of their preaching, despite all their rage, they were still just a fat in a cage. So anyway, it's a weird world that we're living in. It's a weird world that we're living in. Yeah, if you've not caught the updates on PPP and Surfer, I highly recommend giving it a little look-see. I guess that's the nature of the sport we're in, right? Is I'm supposed to encourage people to go find out, the truth about them, the truth from their own mouths. Since their mouths to God's ears have always been 100% honest and accurate and true, we can only assume that they continue to be 100% honest and accurate and true. So anyway, that'll That's for you to do on your own. This is not that kind of show. This is a different kind of show where we shit on people sophisticatedly, not as we would shit on a toilet seat. Okay, so that being said, we are going to read the early super chats. We are going to get into this discussion here, and then we are going to be watching a lot of video today. Hey, what's up, RGE Raiders? Welcome back. Welcome back. To the people who are confused and curious about what a PPP and surfer are, if you don't know, don't. Just don't. Save yourself. Keep that last shred of dignity you have for humanity to yourself and just ignore it. I'm giving you the best life advice you can get. Okay. Let's see, where is, oh my God. Okay. There we go. I think we're about ready to start. Sorry. Getting everything situated. Oh, nope. I got one other thing to do. One other place to look to get these early super chats. Thank you, YouTube. You've built such a beautiful system that I love. If you are new here from like the Viva Fry show or from Geeks and Gamers, welcome. Will you load up, you insufferable website? God, I hate YouTube sometimes. Might have to resort to the old spreadsheet here. There it is. Okay. So, during the Just Some Guy segment, I will probably try to not respond too heavily to super chats because, I'm going to try and get through points that I want to talk about. So if you do send a super chat during that segment, even if it's one of the $20 plus ones that I would typically try to read right away, if there is a little delay, I apologize, but getting through the individual segments and completing a thought, I want to try and do that in a crisp and concise way and not get distracted. I'm pretty sure I will fail because of my most likely undiagnosed ADD, but this is the nature of doing this live. Richard Grubber says, Grug hears 6 long nose die in Holobunga. 6 a lot. Grug think Holobunga not happen. Grug wonder where Smoke Hut went. It's a very strange sort of super chat from Richard Grubber. Not sure who Grug is or what he's talking about, but you do you, fam. Wolfgang Deo says, the secretary at my dentist, she just finished a geography course, so I asked her where Ukraine was. She thought it was random. A friend just visit. That was a weird way to end that. Mario Carter 13 says, God be like, swapping IQ and BMI is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Eldon Bainling says, have you regrown any hair yet or still gay? No, still gay. Blaine 20 says, the gayest. Hey, can you move the table behind you to the center of the painting or will it block access to the bookshelf? Asking for the OCD. Nope, the OCD loses. Give the sign if you're not being held hostage by Nazis. Midwest Rail Fan says, holy crap, just only slightly late. Yes, I apologize. Lady Rackets had fallen asleep on the couch and I decided to pick her up and bring her to bed. Mr. Obi-Wan 2020 says, another 13-hour shift today on my birthday of all days. Biden's mandate. Why am I reading this over here? I could just read it. I read it here in front of my face. It's better. Oh my gosh, it's like a revolution. Biden's mandate has already strangled 6 businesses in my town in Alaska. Thanks for keeping me sane through this horrendous labor shortage, my man. Ice Wallow Cream says, have you had a bottle of Redbreast 21? It comes with a lovely Irish wristwatch. No, I have not. I have not had a Redbreast 21, but I would love to try it sometime. Okay. Oh boy, this is going to be a thing. This is going to be a time. So pardon me on some of this stuff. I have tried to have everything ready to go, except for one thing. I need to get to where some of this began. I've tried to have everything prepared and set, but it's so crazy. It may take me a second to get the right thing up on screen. It may take me a second to get it up. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say here. May take me a second to get it up. What's the green figure on the bookcase over your shoulder? That is a salamander Primaris marine. Just like the Imperial Fists one. And there's up over there, it's backwards, is a Ultra Smurf. All right. So let me preface this. This way before people get misunderstood out of this. I do not have a problem with just some guy. I take issue with some of his arguments, and I think he uses some underhanded sort of statements and accusations in his video, but that is fine. That is okay. He is making an argument, and he's making it in the way that he chooses to make it and the way that he does things on YouTube. This does not mean that I don't like just some guy or that I hate him and want him to die or anything like that. He seems like just a fine guy, and I have no personal issue or beef with him. This will be addressing his arguments and the manner in which he chooses to deliver them, which is the manner of his own choosing. And he has stated his own ground rules, as you will see as we go through the video. Okay, that is what is going on here. This is not any sort of call to action or anything like that. I hope Just Some Guy is wonderfully successful in all that he does. And I think he's an important voice in the media space to be reviewing these things. Where I think he maybe is lacking in credibility, in my opinion, would be in discussing these sort of socioeconomic issues. And I will continually disagree with his assessment of not only what capitalism is, but what is proper in our economy. And that is fine too. He's welcome to his own beliefs. I just don't think anybody should listen to them and implement them. That being said, this is propagated by an argument on FlashCast in which I eventually decided that Just Some Guy was acting like a commie. And so I called him a communist. It's a hyperbolic phrase in some senses. However, I do fully believe that his sort of approach is what begets the road to state ownership and ultimately some sort of communistic, socialistic, or Marxist outlook. That is the preface with all of this that I'm going to, and saying that I was certainly being hyperbolic and bombastic on Saturday, but I stand by the choice of words in the way that they were used and in the way that they're given. I fully disagree with what Just Some Guy believes to be a rational approach to a controlled economy. It's weird. In my opinion, the "we just haven't done it right yet" argument doesn't really fly. But maybe I am misunderstanding that argument. That is perfectly possible. I am far from infallible, and I can certainly have a misdiagnosis on Just Some Guy and what he is saying. And if I do, you are welcome to call me out on it as such. I will always welcome criticism. I will also push back on criticism when I believe it is appropriate, which is what we're going to do right now. So I think I've said enough disclaimers here. I think I have said enough disclaimers. God, I hope so. But we will be going through every single bit of his video. I have not asked for permission. I believe that this will be sufficiently transformative, as there will be several stops with quite a bit of commentary going into it. But if just some guy has any sort of problem with it, he is welcome to talk to me in DMs and see if we can work out a solution. I hope he will not, and will take it in the way that it's intended to be fully transformative of his content for the purpose of responding accurately and fully to the argument we are engaged in. That being said, without further ado, I have no idea. I've listened through this one time. It was hours ago. I have a rough layout of what I am going to say in my brain. I don't write things down because I'm not good at organizing my thoughts in that way. And I have prepared some articles and video clips specifically on the issues that just some guy has mentioned. I will also be, and I'm sorry for this in advance, playing a very significant portion of a Vice interview with Martin Shkreli. And so I apologize for subjecting you guys to a Vice interview. But since much of the discussion is around Martin Shkreli and his purchase of Daraprim, I think it's important to go ahead and hear what the man has to say for himself, rather than hearing it second-handedly through how I remember what he said. So I think, again, and I am going to work really hard and deliver this in a measured way rather than a fun, yelly, screamy way, because I think just some guy's video merits a measured response. I really do.
They appeared on the FlashCast stream and had an interesting debate with Nick Rekieta about capitalism versus ethics, or as Nick calls it, communism.
Immediately, we have set out with a straw man. I didn't realize I would not make it 8 seconds through the video, but he has decided to balance this as capitalism versus ethics, which is implying a couple of different things. First, implying that capitalism is unethical or unconcerned with ethics. This is not actually an accurate statement. Second, that ethics is an appropriate countermand to capitalism in general. And third, by implication, that I am unethical, a theme that you will see throughout the entire show. So I thought it was important to go ahead and immediately start by addressing what ethics is, because I'm not quite sure that my understanding of what ethics is comports with just some guy's usage of the word. I will not go so far as to say that he does not understand what ethics is, although I strongly suspect that to be the case. But I will go ahead and lay out what my definition of ethics is for people to assess, and then they can go ahead and determine if my definition is correct or try to figure out what just some guys is. This is a process called defining your terms. All right. Ethics, as defined by Nick Rekieta. Ethics is a system of moral decisions, right and wrong. That's what it is. Ethics is not universal, and there are different sets of ethics that can be observed in a community, in a group, by an individual. You may have someone who is a Christian ethicist versus a Muslim ethicist. And shockingly, you will find a disparity between what is considered moral or good behavior between the Christian and the atheist. Similarly, you can have a statist ethics. You can have an anarchist ethic. You can have different types of ethics built into hybridized or pseudo systems. So merely saying that capitalism versus ethics exists is to fundamentally misunderstand what ethics is, in my humble opinion. The problem with these discussions is people tend to confuse morality, which is acceptable behavior within a set of ethics, with ethics itself. But that is to imply that there is a universal ethic, and that is not true. That is not true. And to prove this is very simple. Just ask a capitalist versus a communist what you should do with a bottle of water. And, or even if you own a bottle of water, and you will get different answers because their outlook on reality is fundamentally separate. And the ethical set that they use is different. For a capitalist, charging money for a bottle of water is ethical. For an altruist, we'll get rid of the communism thing for a minute. The ethical thing to do with the bottle of water, or perhaps the moral thing to do under an altruistic ethic, would be to give that bottle of water away for free to someone who is in need. So these are differences of ethical sets, which is different from the moral decisions within an ethical set. And if you don't agree on the set of ethics that you're operating under, you will disagree vehemently over what moral behavior is. And this is at the root of every single usage that just some guy will have of the word ethics in this video, even though he tries to use it in, let us say, aggressive, passive-aggressive ways.
Apparently, not wanting people to be screwed over by selfish douchebags trying to make a buck off of people's suffering is the same as wanting to suck Pooh Bear's second belly button.
I'm not going to stop this every 8 seconds and talk as long as I did last time. But again, he has set up a straw man. Not wanting douchebags to be able to work over the system is also not a goal that I have. That is completely separate from the underlying issues of what are property rights and what is the appropriate level of government intervention in those property rights. For me, the answer to that is less. The answer to that is less.
I was fine with ending the debate on the stream, but he made a video about it. I'll link down to it below. So I think it's worth responding further. A good rule of thumb when it comes to a debate is not to straw man someone's position.
That's weird because it's happened twice so far.
And definitely not to do it to attack their character.
That's weird because we've already gotten into the ethics question.
Claiming I'm a communist because I don't agree with your position is a straw man argument and an ad hominem.
It's not actually an ad hominem to call someone a communist or anything else. In fact, that's just either a label or an insult. This is another one of the many misunderstandings in philosophical terms that we will be addressing with just some guy. An ad hominem would be to call him a communist and then suggest he is wrong because he is a communist. That is not actually what is going on here. Someone can be both a communist and be wrong, independent of them being a communist, even if those two positions are correlated. So if someone is a communist and they are wrong on an issue because of their communist sort of ethos leads them to the wrong conclusion, they're still not wrong because they're a communist. They're wrong on the point because they are wrong. The communism just comes as a bonus. So this is not an ad hominem, nor is it a straw man to call someone a communist. A straw man is to construct a position that the other arguing party does not hold and then rail against it. In our debate on Saturday, in calling him a communist, again, with all of the prior disclaimers put out there, which I still stand by the statement. In doing so, I am not railing against some fictional representation of communism that I'm ascribing to just some guy. I am railing against the points that he raised, and I am labeling those points as communistic, along with his overall position as communistic. I've not constructed a straw man of communism. I have used a label or insult, if you want to take it that way, which you probably should. If you're a communist, take everything as an insult, I hope, because commies deserve to be insulted. But that being said, take it as an insult, take it as a label, but you cannot call it an ad hominem. I'm not saying you're wrong because you are a communist. I'm saying you're wrong and you are also a communist.
I'm not bothered by him calling me a communist. However,
Good.
It does show that he wasn't interested in having an honest conversation. And
this is completely untrue and irrational. I don't know how else to respond to that, that just because someone calls you a label that you disagree with, that it makes someone uninterested in having a discussion.
Argues from a severely skewed worldview.
Nope. I argue not from a severely skewed worldview, but from an openly stated free market capitalist worldview, one that is definable, one that is discernible, and one that is readily available to pretty much anyone who wants to look into what free market capitalism is.
I'm fine with that. I deal with the far left all the time.
Remember, we are not setting up straw mans nor using ad hominems in this video, correct? That's why he deals with the far left all the time.
It's just a question of whether Nick knows how biased that makes him sound. And
where on earth are we supposed to be unbiased in an argument? Am I biased towards free market capitalism versus communism? Yes. I will always be biased towards free market capitalism versus communism. I will wear that bias proudly on my sleeve, on my shirt, on my forehead, on my penis, wherever you want me to wear that, I absolutely will. I think that is not only the correct ethical position, I think it is the correct moral position within almost every set of ethics to be biased opposed to communism and in favor of free market capitalism. I think that is the ultimate correct decision. And yes, I will be biased. And just so everybody knows, because this is an often weirdly ascribed trait to fictional lawyers who are not actually present in the world, that lawyers are supposed to be arbiters of neutrality and non-bias. Lawyers may attempt and at some points in time to be unbiased, but the overall thrust of lawyering is to be biased in favor of your client, biased in favor of the position that you believe should be taken on matters of jurisprudence. Bias is baked into lawyering, and being non-biased as a lawyer is not only a bad choice, it also may be unethical. Again, we're going to get into this conflict between what ethics are and what just some guy seems to be calling ethics. But lawyers actually have a set of ethics, a set of professional responsibility rules are in place to enforce the lawyer ethic. And to be unbiased with a client is to fundamentally fail the ethical test of lawyering. If I were to represent someone in an unbiased manner, I would be potentially involved in a subsequent malpractice lawsuit.
And it makes me question whether his arguments have any merit when he's starting off with lazy logical fallacies.
Nothing I have done in that argument was a logical fallacy. I assume he's going to he's referring to the straw man and the ad hominem, those two concepts that he misunderstood as logical fallacies. But again, while straw manning and ad hominem are logical fallacies, they were not present on Saturday.
This all started because we were talking about the Wu flu and the panic buying that happened when the lockdowns began. I brought up the incident where a Tennessee man bought 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer and sold them online for nearly 30 times their retail price.
To be clear, let's be very clear about this, because we're going to get into a pretty good legal bit about this guy, and we're going to talk about the ethics of what the attorney general of Tennessee did to this man, and I'll let you guys decide whether or not the ethical behavior occurred from the man, from the government, from neither, from both. We will determine that in a little bit. But this man went on to sell 300 of the 17,700 bottles of hand sanitizer. But notice the headline. He had nowhere to sell them because Amazon and eBay did not agree with his price gouging strategies, and they removed his account access. He was an eBay and Amazon marketplace seller. That was his small business. That is what he did. He was removed from the platform for violating their terms of service. In essence, the market corrected the problem days, if not weeks, before the government would move in to intervene. This is an important point that will probably not be brought up by just some guy, but I will bring up to you here. And if we have to, we will go into the actual article itself, because this is critical. He was not able to sell 17,700 bottles. Further, the headline of this thing, the headlines around this guy indicate that he was selling the product for a very high multiple of the price. I believe 30 times the price. Just some guy might say it in a second, but it's important to know that he actually sold it for a range of values between $8 and $60 a bottle. That range of values, to me, and I might not be correct because the New York Times is shockingly vague on the details here, but that range to me says that he was engaged in eBay and the Amazon marketplace, which means that those items were being bid up through competition on the Amazon marketplace. It's also important to note that he acquired all of these items in Tennessee, but eBay and Amazon are not limited to regional areas. And so for people to go ahead and purchase these, we're purchasing them on the national market when they were deprived, quote unquote, from the Tennessee market. Real quick, I'll take a pause for these two super chats. The Denialist says, capitalists, do whatever you want with your water. Communists, give water up to Central Distribution Authority or die. Zenko Kitsune says, first time griftee. Oh, thank you. Welcome. Says, a friend needs help in Michigan. Wrongfully evicted. Landlords hired unofficial crew to move belongings, some stolen and lots of damage. That's just the beginning. I can email more details. Any help is appreciated. Email me. I have a couple contacts in Michigan that may be able to look at your friend's case. Okay. Getting back to that, this video.
Nick was surprised that I thought that it was appropriate for the state to take the items from this man in this situation.
I'm still surprised that anyone would think that it is appropriate, whatever you think the action should be, that the state should take the items from the person. I think that is a little bit of a problem. That's just my opinion. I don't believe that the state has a right to confiscate private property.
Nick's argument is that the man paid for all the items, so they were his, so he could do whatever he wanted to do with them, which is a fair point, and also not the issue at hand.
It absolutely is the issue at hand.
When someone declares something wrong, I boil it down to a basic question. Is it the act itself that's wrong, or the nature of the act that's wrong?
That is an incoherent dichotomy that he is trying to establish here. I'm not sure what the difference between the act and the nature of the act. I guess if I'm exploring it, I would say if I shoot someone in the head, is that wrong? Or is it only wrong if I shoot them in the head because it was an unjustifiable headshot, right? Like if they're threatening my family and I shoot them in the head, that makes it okay. I think that's what he means by the nature of the action, which I would more ascribe to motive or justification for the action, but I'm not quite sure how he defines it. So I will be fair and say that while I don't understand exactly what he is exactly saying, I think I get it and mostly will agree.
Let's look at Mr. Tennessee. In his video, Nick agreed that what the man did is price gouging, but he still argued that the man bought what he was selling, comparing it to someone buying up all the copies of Final Fantasy and selling them for thousands of dollars.
Very quickly, while I agree that it was price gouging in the colloquial sense, we will explore the legalities of price gouging under Tennessee statute that this guy was charged with. And I believe that under the legal statute, that this was not price gouging under Tennessee law. I believe that he was wrongfully charged and threatened to settle by turning over all of this stuff. And a reminder that 1/3 of the stuff that he was forced to donate under threat of law, under threat of the bullet from the government, was given to the government, not to charity.
Arguing that no one gets to come and take those games. Well, one, those aren't the same situation.
In my opinion, they absolutely are the same situation. If I buy out a market of one sort of thing, then I have the right to all of the items I have acquired in that market. So for me, those two things will be the same situation, especially. And I gave, I believe in that video, an out, and even a counterpoint that the purpose of buying up all of the Final Fantasy games was to specifically manipulate the market in a particular direction to my benefit, which I still stand by. That is a right of something to do. And everyone who to the mooned GameStop and AMC must necessarily agree that that is a proper motive to engage in.
And two, what Nick mentioned is currently happening. People are buying up PS5s and selling them for ridiculous prices online. But that's not what happened with Mr. Tennessee. What happened with Mr. Tennessee is that he heard about the pandemic and people buying hand sanitizer and thought, here's a financial opportunity, and went with his brother to small shops, buying up their hand sanitizer and such, traveling a total of 1,300 miles between Tennessee and Kentucky. They then went online and sold the $2 bottles for upwards of $60.
Okay, to be very clear about this, so we have the facts right. These guys went out the day after the first coronavirus death was reported in the United States. I'm not quite sure that we can say that they heard about people buying up hand sanitizer and then decide to do it themselves. I'm not 100% sure that that is the accurate assessment of the situation. What we do know is they acted really early in the coronavirus pandemic in the United States. After the first reported death, the next day they went up and purchased all of the hand sanitizer they can. Again, traveling 1,300 miles to do so. I'm not sure if anyone is keeping track, but at the rates that Just Some Guy is listed, where it's a $2 bottle of hand sanitizer, that would require a $35,000-ish investment, plus several hours of time and 1,300 miles of travel. This was not a minimal feat. It required tons of capital resources that they put into this measure.
I find this unethical, immoral, and wrong. And if we go back to my
you can say it's unethical, immoral, and wrong all you want. That is a perfectly acceptable position for you to have. It really... Unethical and immoral are the same thing under the way that I understand ethics. And I think they're actually interchangeable the way that Just Some Guy uses it. And that would make this a triple redundant statement. Unethical, immoral, and wrong are synonyms for any other purpose in this discussion.
Basic question. Is it the act itself or the nature of the act that's wrong? Is it wrong to buy up all the products that other people want to buy and sell them at 10, 20, or 100 times the price?
I would say no, it is not wrong. Does it make you a douchebag? Is it irritating? Yeah, sure. Maybe it makes you a douchebag. I don't know. I guess we have to really get into the nature of the act. And to be fair, I don't think Just Some Guy has actually adequately assessed the nature of the act from this guy's perspective, because Just Some Guy believes him to be motivated by greed. But what is greed?
Intrinsically, no. It is a douche move, and I think the companies that allow online sales should prohibit people from raising their prices to that extent.
Which they did in this case.
Which would fall under the terms of services of using those platforms. But is that what Mr. Tennessee did? No. He didn't just buy up all the Purell at random and then, when he heard about the pandemic, decide to sell them at Gibson prices. No. He heard there was a pandemic, found out what resources people needed, and attempted to buy all those resources. And he does this so that he can profit.
That's a distinction without a difference, in my opinion. One, it does not make any sort of economic sense to bet on something that doesn't exist. Like, oh, you know what? If he would have bought all the Purell at random, like he's just an autism who must collect Purell bottles and happen to buy all of the Purell in existence, then it would be okay. I actually think this is a little bit disingenuous of Just Some Guy. I do not believe, based on his arguments, that he would be accepting of someone who hoarded these compulsively for their own use, not distributing them or having them confiscated at a later date, or even distributing them at a higher price if they had just innocently purchased them. But now might be an interesting time to talk about something really important in regards to this overall story. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It's one of these. Here we go. In one of the specific New York Times articles discussing this case, we actually have a complication to this answer. And here it goes. This starts here. We will not tolerate price gouging in this time of exceptional need, and we will take aggressive action to stop it, Attorney General Herbert H. Slattery III of Tennessee said in a news release. Tennessee's price gouging law prohibits charging grossly excessive prices for a variety of items, including food, gas, and medical supplies. And it also does say, or anything of the like kind, which I think Purell might fall under a likeness to a medical supply. I'm not quite sure that a $2 novelty bottle of Purell actually qualifies as a full medical supply, but we'll say that it probably falls under the statute. After the governor declares a state of emergency, the state can fine up to $1,000 a violation. This is actually an incorrect read of the statute. It says after the governor or president declare a state of emergency. But notice the next paragraph. The language of the law could benefit Mr. Colvin. Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee declared a state of emergency on March 12th, activating the price gouging law. The Colvin brothers bought all the sanitizer and wipes in question before that date. And Mr. Colvin said he did not sell anything after it. Again, he was only able to sell 300 items before Amazon and eBay completely shut him down and locked him out of his accounts, meaning that the market prevented this not only before the legal system was able to, but before the law was actually in effect. This is devastating to Just Some Guy's entire argument. The market, not the government, went ahead and corrected the problem. I think people need to let that sink in, but it does raise a subsequent important question. The acts that were done by these brothers were not illegal at the time the acts were done. And yet, knowing that, the Attorney General of Tennessee proceeded to file charges to then force them into a settlement, which would require them to go ahead and donate as part of the settlement, and the dropping of any criminal prosecution would require them to donate all of the goods that they bought, effectively enforcing a $35,000 donation to the government by the force of a bullet. I think we need to go ahead and reassess what ethic we're under here, because to me, that is an ethic of tyranny, utilizing the state to force a quote unquote charitable contribution, of which I do not know if they're able to claim this as a charitable tax contribution, because this is a settlement to a criminal lawsuit. But doing that, knowing that they were not actually covered by the statute that is on the books in their actions, is despicable to me. To utilize the government to threaten prosecution of a non-criminal act for the purposes of retribution and media bylines and confiscation of private property is ultimately awful. So I will again say this factual legal basis is devastating to Just Some Guy's argument. And it goes back to what he's talking about directly here. He is talking about if they had gone out and purchased this stuff ahead of time, let's truncate his argument to ahead of time, then it would be fine. Well, interestingly, the legislators in Tennessee decided that there was an actual constructive notice period, and that is the governor declaring a state of emergency, or as I mentioned earlier, the president of the United States declaring a state of emergency. They happened on the same day. So since neither the governor nor the president of the United States had declared a state of emergency at the time these acts took place, they were, for all legal purposes, random acts. They randomly purchased hand sanitizer. They did not do it in violation of a statute. They did not do it in violation of the rule of law.
From other people's emergency needs. He intended to exploit.
There was no emergency need at the time they did this. And it's important to logically consider the fact that they were able to procure 17,700 bottles of Purell merely by going from store to store in the area that they were able to go over a one-day period. to gather this much stuff. It literally was not an emergency need by any understanding of the word. No one had, prior to their act, had struggled to get Purell. There was no emergency need. And let's also not understate the fact that Purell is not the only way to sanitize your hands or any surfaces. In fact, there are plenty of alternative methods out there, one of them just being a bar of soap.
People's suffering. That is what makes it wrong. It's the unethical act of playing with other people's lives so he can make a buck.
Remember, we are not making straw man arguments in Just Some Guy's video because he is opposed to them. Yet he has imposed upon this guy, he has ascribed to him a motive of playing with other people's lives, quote, just to make a buck.
That's not me saying that. That's him. From the New York Times, quote, "It's been a huge amount of whiplash. From being in a situation where what I've got coming and going could potentially put my family in a really good place financially to, what the heck am I going to do with all of this?" Now, he later claimed that he didn't intend to keep medical supplies from people who needed them. But
notice what he's done here. He has taken one statement and used it to his advantage. He then summarizes and dismisses a subsequent statement from the guy that he never intended to keep medical supplies from anyone. By his logic, the stores would be restocked. And actually, at the time that this happened on March 1st, by everyone's logic, the stores would be restocked. Up until March, the stores had always been restocked, and relatively quickly. He was hoping to move these things pretty fast and that other people would come in. And he knew he was going with this idea that he was going to have to move the product fast because he was on a limited timetable. Now, the fact that Purell ended up having a shortage nationwide later due to COVID. I don't think it was actually in March, but later in the year, due to COVID slowing down production and supply lines, was not something that this guy had contemplated. And why would he contemplate that? We were early on in the pandemic, and that sort of stuff had not happened in America for a very, very long time. But let's take a look back at what he said just a moment prior. He was doing this to put his family in a financial position that was advantageous. Just Some Guy phrases this as greed, as some sort of antithesis of altruism. However, I would argue that it is a parent's moral and ethical obligation, the ethics of parenting, if you will, to go ahead and provide for your family in the best way that you know how, especially one that comports with the law and your own sense of ethical obligations. And in this case, this guy did not see the wrong of his actions, not because his actions were objectively wrong. As Just Some Guy has conceded multiple times in the video so far, his actions under quote unquote different circumstances would be just fine, although maybe quote douchey.
I think any reasonable person would understand that buying up what was being touted by the media and the lying munchkin as a necessity to prevent contracting and spreading the virus would.
The media and the lying munchkin. I'm not sure who he means by lying munchkin. Is that Fauci that he's talking about? I just don't know on that one.
Result in people who needed it not getting it. He's not a dumb man. He's just selfish and greedy.
And there we go. He is selfish and greedy. Two completely non-ad hominem statements. Now, I don't know if he means them in an ad hominem way, although I think he kind of does. But I am welcome to be wrong on that. I have set the groundwork for what an ad hominem is. It seems to me that saying he is not a dumb man, that he is selfish and greedy, makes him wrong due to his selfishness and greed. But I have stated my piece on it, and people are open to interpret it in that way.
You know, a capitalist. And like many capitalists.
And notice the disdain for capitalism.
He's willing to exploit others just to make a buck, even when people's lives are at stake. His argument is that he has the right to do this, but the defense, as Nick gave during the stream and in his video, that those he's doing it to apparently don't have any rights themselves.
Remember, we are not using ad hominems or strawmans in Just Some Guy's video, although I never, at any point in time, implied that no one else had rights in my argument, nor would I. In fact, the basis of my argument is the concept of property rights. And the concept of property rights starts with the ultimate property right being the right to one's own person and the one's own body. That is the first property that you will own. It is immutable to you and cannot be taken from you without your consent, without it being a violation of your right. This will come into play probably a little bit later, but this is a straw man argument in full glory, because this is not something I ever said, nor was it something that implied. In fact, everyone has an equal right to the same opportunity that this guy had. In fact, anyone in Tennessee on the same day could have gotten in their car and driven around and purchased bunches and bunches of Purell. And had they in fact done so, they would have limited his ability to manipulate the market. But they did not. Nothing that he did infringed upon their right to do so, nor did anything that he do negate their right to do so. No one has a right to buy a bottle of Purell. And this is where the ultimate failing in Just Some Guy's thinking comes into full force throughout the entire discussion. You do not have a right to purchase a specific product. You have a right to go to the market, use your capital to procure what goods your capital is available to procure. That is the right that everybody has. If you have less capital than someone else, you have less ability to enforce those rights than anybody else. That's just the way it ends up working out. It does not mean that your rights are limited or even curtailed, because if we were to recognize an equality of right to purchase, that would necessitate an equality of capital resources. And it's almost like there's a system, an economic, socioeconomic system that requires and necessitates an equality of capital distributed amongst the populace to produce equal outcomes. I think it's called communism, but I'm not sure.
Which is contradicted by our law and the reason and ethics guiding that law. You don't have the right to exploit people. You're deliberately buying all the necessities in an emergency to prevent other people from acquiring it from anyone other than you.
Let me say two things on this. You absolutely have the right to exploit people in the actual definition of exploitation. You of course have the right to exploit people. You don't have the right to exploit people through deception. You don't have the right to exploit people in a way that infringes on their rights. But again, there is no constitutional positive right to any particular item in the marketplace. They tried that in other countries like Russia. They failed. They tried that in countries like South Africa. They also failed. Positive rights to goods do not function, because if those goods do not exist, then your rights are infringed and someone has to make them at the point of a gun, which is an ethical issue for some of us. But that being said, even let me rewind just a second, because I want to get what he said accurate.
Ethics guiding that law. You don't have the right to exploit people. You're deliberately buying all the necessities in an emergency to prevent other people from acquiring it from anyone other than you.
That's not true. Again, by distributing the products on the Amazon and eBay marketplaces, he is actually competing in a global market for those goods. He did not procure all of the global supply of Purell or anything even close to it, nor was he the sole marketplace purveyor of Purell.
In that situation, I don't have a problem with the government taking it from you to give it to those you're trying to screw over. Although, based on the New York Times, he donated all the items.
Again, we're not using ad hominems or strawmans in Just Some Guy's video. It's important to remember that. But screwing over someone is, again, an imposition of one's own perspective on the person's motive. And I'm not sure that that guy had any motive to, quote unquote, screw someone over.
Apparently, he donated 2/3 of it to a local church and the rest of it to the state of Tennessee, who split it with Kentucky.
Let's just remind people what that donation was. It's in the articles. I don't know if just some guy explored the articles fully, but that donation was a criminal settlement, a settlement to avoid criminal charges, which means that free will donation that he made was motivated by the government's guns pointing directly at him. Because what happens when you have a criminal charge and you refuse to comply? I'm sorry, the government points its guns at you. This was not a donation. This was a confiscation in exchange for a protection from criminal prosecution. It was donation at gunpoint.
Now, there are two interesting points here. One, why he donated it. That was because Amazon and eBay suspended his accounts.
That is an incorrect assessment of why he donated it. Now, that may have ultimately led to him donating it, but he donated it, as stated in the New York Times articles, because he was threatened with criminal prosecution, and that was settlement for his criminal prosecution and to avoid any further criminal charges,
blocking him from selling on their platforms. The storage company where he stored the goods also booted him out. He had the option of trying to sell it locally, but with the news coverage, that probably wouldn't have gone well.
He did not have the options to try and sell it locally. He was being criminally charged under the price gouging statute of Tennessee. And it's important to remind just some guy at this point that not only was he being criminally charged, he was being criminally charged for a crime that he necessarily could not have committed because the statute was not in effect on the dates of the requisite acts. Had he continued to try and sell them locally after the emergency orders were issued, and had he maintained a quote unquote price gouge, even though a price gouge is not actually defined clearly under Tennessee law, but had he done that at that time, he might have been in violation of the statute. But there's no way to know if he actually would, because the circumstances around justifiable price gouging, if you want to know why your gas goes up in a crisis, or why things like toilet paper cost exorbitant amounts of money, even from grocery stores, there is actually a well-founded exception to price gouging based on market realities. And frankly, had he held on to the Purell that he legally purchased for prior to it becoming a criminal act, had he done that and then tried to sell it locally, even at a price gouge price when it was not otherwise available in the market, he may not have been violating the law. And in fact, we have lots of instances of that occurring in this pandemic from major retailers. So yet again, I must emphasize that just some guy is wrong on the facts of his own arguments.
He was stuck with items he couldn't sell, so it would appear that he donated it to get rid of it. And
if you just read the article, you would find out that he settled it. In fact, maybe I should go ahead and bring it up. Let's see. Here. It's right here. It's very far down in the article. In fact, it's Tennessee brothers who hoarded hand sanitizer settle to avoid price gouging fine. The fine is up to $1,000 per instance of price gouging. But Matt and Noah Colvin reached a settlement this week with the state attorney general in the widely publicized price gouging case. So if you had just read the headline or the opening paragraph, you would know that it was not motivated by a lack of ability to sell the goods so much as it was motivated by the threat of government force.
And perhaps to garner some goodwill, because the Tennessee Attorney General's office sent him a cease and desist letter. Why? Because I'm not the only one with a functional sense of morality and ethics. So Tennessee has an anti-price gouging law, which this jackass violated.
He actually did not. You should read the law. And if you cannot properly read the law, you should consult an attorney. And if you can't consult an attorney because you're just making a YouTube video and it's not really worth the potential several $100 consultation fee, you could just read the New York Times article that specifically says that the language of the law could benefit Mr. Colvin because all of his activity took place before the statute would have actually been told. So he did not violate the law.
That law, by the way,
despite him calling him a jackass. Remember, we are not using ad hominems or straw man arguments in just some guy's video.
Is the very kind of regulation I mentioned in my debate with Nick that he doesn't think should be in place because laws are communism.
I do not think they should be in place. That is correct. What is not correct is me ever stating that laws are communism. And again, it is important to remember that we are not using strawmans or ad hominems in the video of just some guy.
You need a law like that because there are people who will exploit others in this way.
I disagree that a law is needed. In fact, I would point to the instance of two brothers in Tennessee who purchased 17,700 bottles of hand sanitizer, and that problem was actually remedied and rectified by the market long before the law was able to take action. You do not need laws like this. The behavior is corrected by the marketplace itself. But don't take my word for it. You could read any number of papers or articles on the subject that talk about how price hikes in types of emergency actually control supply in a beneficial way. But that's up to you.
It could be benign, like the assholes buying up all the PS5s, or it could be people trying to make a
Why is buying up the PS5 benign versus the hand sanitizer? Again, this is based on the faulty premise that someone not receiving hand sanitizer will literally die or receive significant enough harm to merit the hand sanitizer being this much of a moral issue, but that a person not receiving a PS5 is in no different position. This is wrong. This is inconsistent. It is illogical and it is unreasoned. And I want to point out that just because just some guy is delivering his response in a calm and measured way, that does not automatically comport with the ideas of rationality, reason, or consistency.
Buck in the middle of a pandemic. Now, I do agree that if they just came and took his shit because he was the only one with it, that would be wrong and hard to justify. But
the question is why it would be wrong and hard to justify to take his stuff just because he's the only one with it. Why do you agree on that principle? What is the difference? If you can force someone to sell at a specific price, why can't you force them to sell? Remember, if the principle that we are going with is the need of the potential buyer, there is no moral difference between forcing someone to sell at a quote unquote reasonable price and forcing them to sell the good that they don't need. Again, this is an inconsistency in this thinking.
That's not what happened. What happened is that he tried to exploit others to make a profit by hoarding things he knew they would need to buy. In that situation, I don't have a problem at all with the government taking those items, and only those items, and donating them to the people who need them. I phrased it that,
which the government did not actually do. The government donated them to themselves.
That way because I don't trust the government with that much power either.
I want to marinate in the irony of that sentence following this first 5.5 minutes of video, so I will play it again.
At all with the government taking those items, and only those items, and donating them to the people who need them. I phrased it that way because I don't trust the government with that much power either. The role of the government is to serve the people, all of us. This kind of government...
That is not actually the role of the American government. The role of the government is to protect property rights.
Control should only be used in circumstances like this where it affects all of us.
This necessarily did not affect all of us. This is, again, a misconception or a misframing of the argument. His purchase of Purell did not affect me in any way. Do you know why? I don't buy Purell. I didn't buy Purell during the pandemic. I didn't buy Purell before the pandemic, and I won't buy Purell after the pandemic. If anything, I would buy cheap vodka and splash that on my hands and then drink it. Because there's no medical necessity to Purell. There are any other number of sanitizing solutions that are available to people, and those do not suddenly go out of style or become disusable just because Purell is not available on a shelf. And it's important to remember that society and America and the entirety of humanity got along without a Purell style solution for a very long time before it became a fad, which may in fact be weakening all of our immune systems, but that's a different topic for a different day.
The principle of freedom must apply equally. It can't just be as...
Isn't it ironic that the principle of freedom must be applied equally, except he is necessarily infringing on one man's freedom to use his capital in the way that he wants for the benefit of unnamed other parties?
as Nick seems to argue, that you get to do whatever you
let me back this up because I cut him off in the middle of a word.
should only be used in circumstances like this where it affects all of us. The principle of freedom must apply equally. It can't just be, as Nick seems to argue, that you get to do whatever you want to do, irrespective of how it affects others.
Let me be clear. I in no way have ever made that argument. It is a ludicrous assertion. Who is you? Is it just me? I've never argued that my rights are superior to anyone else's rights. Now, my rights situationally may be superior to someone else's. My right to be present in my home is superior to anyone else's right to be present in my home. But that's not what we're talking about here. That is not an argument I have ever made. And in fact, the equal application of rights means equal application of rights. Something that I don't know how just some guy has gotten backwards, but I am relatively confident he has convinced himself that this is the correct approach.
To go back to Nick's Final Fantasy example, yes, you have the right to buy as many games as you want, but so does everyone else.
Yes, they do. And that is where it ends. And that is what is so baffling about this argument, because everybody else had the right to go out and buy the same amount of Purell that this guy bought, but they didn't. And everybody else would have the same right to go out and buy every copy of Final Fantasy, but they won't.
So if you're buying up every copy so that no one else can get any, we have a problem.
Why is that a problem? That is not a problem. This is where his entire logical and rational attempt to break down the argument will always fail. There is no problem. The problem is that you want something that someone else has. You cannot get it. So you desire the government to enforce your want upon someone else adverse to their property rights. Your entire argument is that the government needs to enforce your want over someone else's right, a right that moments ago you acknowledged that everyone has. Everyone has the right to go out and buy up the copies of Final Fantasy. Now, not everyone has the opportunity or the resources or the means or the transportation or any other number of factors, but they all have the same right.
My solution would be purely capitalistic.
Oh, I bet it would, wouldn't it?
Pressure retailers to refuse to sell you any additional games. They don't have to do business with you, and you're free to offer whatever money you want to whomever buys the games. But of course, they don't have to do business with you either. Next, pressure Square Enix to provide another way to buy physical copies, preferably one that would require you to spam that service in order to get all the copies, which could potentially violate the law, allowing the rest of us to get the game and watch our dumbass get locked up.
Notice how that's the purely capitalistic solution would end up with you in jail.
Nick then goes on to mention an analogy I used about water, and he gets it wrong. He says the analogy is that if he has water and I need water to live, I don't get to come and take his water. I would agree, but that wasn't my analogy.
You using a bad analogy is not my fault, but let's hear what your analogy is.
My analogy was that if there was a sole source of fresh water that everyone was using, and you buy the land the water is on, dam the water, and then try to sell it to us at insane prices, this is unethical and you should be prevented from doing it.
This gets into a very complex question of riparian rights rather than just mere real property rights. Just because you buy the land that water is on and then quote unquote dam it so that other people can't use it doesn't make sense. If you were to dam the water that is on the property, then specifically no one else could possibly have any sort of right of access to it. That would be a stagnant body of water that you own. If I buy all of the property surrounding a lake, including a lake, you do not have rights to my lake, period, ever, under any circumstances. Now, you wouldn't dam a lake, though. Just some guy seems to be mixing up his analogies here, and that is why this is a poor analogy. If the water is flowing in a particular direction, coming onto the property at some point and then leaving the property at another point, he might be right that I might not have the ability to dam the water and prevent its flow onto another property. But interestingly, this has nothing to do with the need of another person. This has everything to do with the riparian rights of the subsequent property. The downstream property has a right, and my right as an upstream property is not necessarily superior to it. My right as an upstream property can actually be inferior to a downstream property. This is why we have things like negative easements and use restrictions that run with the title of the land. I don't know how much property law just some guy knows, but I know enough property law to hate it and not want to talk about it ever again. I can tell you with specificity that this analogy is utterly broken because it seems to be mixing up the metaphor or mixing up the scenario. You wouldn't dam standing water. If there is standing water on your property, subject to the governmental intrusions that we have allowed, you own the entirety, every single drop of the standing water, and no one has a right of access unless that right of access has been written into the title and run with the title of the land with that intention long ago. And presumably the cost of your property has taken that title restriction into account. However, if you have flowing water that would subsequently leave your land, then your rights are not wrapped up in property ownership around the water. Your rights to that water are actually subject to the rights of other people, which may be superior or inferior to yours depending on your land itself. So just some guy has presented, again, an impossible analogy to go through due to, I think, ignorance about how water rights actually work. I don't mean to ascribe ignorance as a negative. Most people in their lives should have no knowledge of riparian rights. Most people do not have to concern themselves with water rights of flowing water across their property, and most of them are also not lawyers. That is why most people are not suicidal. That being said, this analogy is broken, and you using a broken analogy doesn't somehow make my criticism of your analogy incorrect.
And if necessary, the water should be taken from you so the rest of us don't die. If you have the
Again, I want to point out the incorrect premise of his weird hypothetical in which there is only one water source in the entire earth, and I happen to be the one who purchased that water source somehow, and then prevent it, because it wasn't already prevented somehow, from getting to the rest of the world.
right to live, which I assume Nick agrees with. He seems a man unfamiliar with ethics, so I could be wrong.
Remember that we are not using straw men or ad hominems in our discussion on just some guy's video. Let's go back. I think I missed it.
Necessary, the water should be taken from you so the rest of us don't die. If you have the right to live, which I assume Nick agrees with, he seems a man unfamiliar with ethics, so I could be wrong.
Very interesting.
Then it's unethical and immoral to deliberately block off the sole source of water, whether you're doing it to make a profit or use it for something else or just to do it.
Again, you have created, remember, we're not creating a straw man, but you, in this analogy, have created a straw man situation that does not exist under any system that we are discussing. America does not have a sole source of water, nor does the planet, nor does anything else. But what's coming up soon is very interesting.
It's a required resource for existence, so no, you don't get to do that. The same goes for air and food. You're welcome to build a farm, grow food, and refuse to share it. You're not welcome to go to an area that's the sole source of food, claim it for yourself, and then try to profit off of starving people.
This is an interesting take because no, you are not able to go and claim something for yourself. You are not able to go and claim the sole source of food for yourself. That would be in violation of somebody. We don't know who. We don't know the prior owner of the sole source of food, but that would be in violation of someone's rights to claim it for yourself. So again, these analogies are getting more and more ridiculous because one, they're hypotheticals that do not exist. Two, they involve the weird confiscation adverse to their rights. Although that is something that communists have done, look at Ukraine. But I digress. That's not what just some guy is talking about.
As for whether people can take it from you, Yes, they can. It's called war.
Oh, so people can take it from you by war. So we are now arguing that war is a matter of rights. War is necessarily an infringement on rights, either infringements on your rights to peaceful ownership or whatever. This is, again, gone so far off the rails into la la fantasy land that it is hard to consider this as a serious, rational discussion at this point, even though he is making his points very, very calmly and succinctly. They are not actually jiving with anything we discussed. But when you bring the use of force to take something that someone else has, you're necessarily talking about an infringement on that person's property rights. And how this is lost on just some guy is actually beyond me.
You have a resource and you withhold that resource, and people will eventually come and take it from you and probably kill your family and you in the process. In that order, so you suffer before you die.
I'm left, I don't know exactly how to say this, because I don't want to be accusatory in this, but I'm left with the rationale that just some guy believes that if you withhold resources according to your perceived rights, the justified response is war, in which you and your family, well, your family and then you, so you suffer more, are killed to rectify your perceived rights, is the solution. Which sounds a lot like communism. I mean, that is what happened in the Holodomor. That is what happens under totalitarian regimes. That is what happened in South Africa. That is what happened in Rwanda.
And who will you turn to when this happens? The government?
No, because the government would be the ones doing that to you, I suppose.
That commie institution with the commie things called laws?
Again, I have never, ever, ever made the argument that laws are communist. I made the argument that price controls are communist. Price controls are communist. Ultimately, it is the control of, or you can say Marxist or just totalitarian, but it is a central planned economic solution that I disagree with inherently. But the idea is that the government enforces and protects property rights, something that just some guy does not seem to understand.
You know, the regulations used to justify defending the rights you claim you have? You don't exist in a vacuum by yourself. You live in a society with other people.
Hashtag we live in a society.
So while you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, shocking as it may seem to Nick, so does everyone else.
That is not shocking to me in any way, nor have I ever argued against it. In fact, I've argued in favor of it far more than just some guy has in this discussion.
For us to function as a society, we must protect the rights of everyone, not just you. That requires some policy, regulation, or law, and the means of enforcing it so that everyone's rights are protected and respected, which means we will need to compromise because our actions affect other people. It's the guiding principles of reason and ethics that allow you to argue that you even have rights, let alone argue that they should be protected. It's those guiding principles that govern our interactions with each other, and the same principles that make slavery wrong, that make forced prostitution wrong, that make exploiting children wrong, that make lying to customers about your products wrong, that make price gouging wrong. You can try to rationalize the "it's mine, I can do what I want" argument all you want. That doesn't make it true. The moment you affect other people, the situation changes.
This is incorrect. Just by owning a product, you affect other people because it has taken one unit out of the economy that was otherwise in the economy. Just some guy is incorrect on this argument, but I will let his words speak for themselves.
It's not just your rights we're dealing with, but theirs too. There's another major flaw in Nick's logic, which is that he's very confident that all of this will play out in a perfect version of his utopic capitalist worldview.
I have never said that in any sort of way. However, I must point back to the reality of the situation that spawned this, in which the two brothers were removed from the market for their bad economic actions by the market, not by the government and not by regulation. This is something that has escaped just some guy the entire time.
He thinks no one can take what he bought because he bought it, so it's his. Except sometimes the thing sold doesn't belong to the person who sold it.
Remember, we are not making any straw man arguments in Just Some Guy's video.
If someone sells you a stolen item, do you get to keep it because you bought it? If I understand Nick's
Maybe is the answer to that.
logic, the answer is yes. The ethical, logical, and legal answer is no.
That is not always the ethical, logical, or legal answer. Shockingly, it is sometimes the legal answer, but whether it is ethical or logical is actually a different question.
Ignoring logic, ethics, and reason is how we get people like Martin Shkreli. Nick.
Oh, now is when it's going to get fun. We haven't even gotten to the Vice video yet. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys are in for like a 3-hour takedown of Just Some Guy. Darn it.
Brought him up during the debate and
Aha! I want you to listen to that because I am going to point something out here.
Logic, ethics, and reason is how we get people like Martin Shkreli. Nick brought him up during the debate.
Did I? Did I bring up Martin Shkreli during a debate? That's weird. It's kind of like there's a receipt here. Would that be possible? Would there be a receipt on this? I don't know. Why would there be a receipt on this? This fucking pandemic was the first time in my life when I would go to not one store, but every store in town, and they would all be out of the same thing. And you go, okay, this is an actual supply chain distribution in America. I've been to Walmart in Mexico, and I've seen, you'll have a big empty shelf thing there or whatever. And you're like, oh, well, it's Mexico. That's fucking weird. This is happening everywhere you went.
Part of that too is that they stupidly, when they knew that this was going to go down and they were going to lock things down, they were allowing people to buy trucks full of shit, knowing full well that that's just out of line. You shouldn't allow anyone to do that. So they were allowing people to go out with these, like whole pickup trucks full of toilet paper, full of hand. There was one dude who was going around all the stores in his local area, buying up all the hand sanitizer from every mom and pop shop. And they were selling it for like $40 online.
Man, I don't have any problem with that person.
I remember that guy, the government cracked down on his ass. So
they took it from him because it's like, dude, you can't do that.
Yeah, but I disagree with that. Like that guy went out and bought all that stuff, and then the government just literally fucking took it.
I think that I understand why on a principle level it's unfair, but what he did was effectively fuck over everyone else. So in that circumstance in this case where nobody knows how this stuff is actually working, how you can get it, and this is one thing that we do know can kill the virus, and you're just going to go and hoard it so you can be an asshole. Yeah, we're going to take your shit. I'm not for that ever. I am, because we're going to die if you don't do that. So
I'm sorry, we're not going to die. We're not going to die because some idiot in Tennessee or whatever bought a bunch of hand sanitizer.
If you do it for there, then eventually they're going to do it for other stuff. Like you saw with that dude who got sent to prison with Shkreli, whatever his name was, who got sent to prison with the drugs because he came up with some drug and he was going to sell it for like some exorbitant amount of money. When you have one person hoarding everything.
Did you notice what just happened there? Who brought up Martin Shkreli? I don't think it was me in that instance. I think it was just some guy who brought up Martin Shkreli. That's going to be important because apparently I trapped just some guy because he didn't know enough about Martin Shkreli, which I brought up. A mistake he will not make again.
And given that I knew very little about his situation other than the price hike on a drug and him going to jail for something unrelated, I wasn't prepared to talk about the issue and walked right into Nick's gotcha.
How is that my gotcha? Gotcha! You're punching yourself, man. I didn't bring up Martin Shkreli. You did. Absolutely incorrect. You did not walk into my gotcha. I did not lay a clever trap for you. And to label it as such is disingenuous and dishonest.
Where he withheld information about Shkreli to then spring it on me to prove me wrong.
I did not withhold information about Shkreli. In fact, I just used information that I had discovered about Shkreli after you brought it up. I was firing from the hip, like I always do, except in this video, in which I have gone ahead to prepare it, because you wanted to deliver a calm and rational argument to make you seem like the reasonable person. Well, if you're going to deliver a calm and rational and researched and well-produced and clipped argument for consumption, calling me out on things, I will do it live, and I will bury you calmly and rationally with your own words and misrepresentations. I will not do it and clip it down and trim it up for public consumption. I'll just do it off the cuff. But if you want me to prepare for an argument, I absolutely will. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared for the argument on Saturday while drinking and having fun on FlashCast. And that's why it was a fun yelling session that could have ended there. But alas, here we are.
Which I also wasn't anticipating. A mistake I won't repeat.
I assume you will repeat it because you're the one who started the conversation about Martin Shkreli, whereas I did not.
What happened with Martimar is that his company bought the drug Daraprim, which is used to treat parasites and the type of pneumonia associated with HIV/AIDS. The company raised the price from $13.50 to $750 overnight. The patent for Vampire Hunter D had expired, but there wasn't any generic version of the drug, meaning Martimar's company had the only source.
Let's be very clear. Drug patents last 20 years. Daraprim was created in 1940. So not only did a generic not exist, but a generic had not existed for approximately 50 years at the time Martin Shkreli purchased it. 50 years in which any company at all could have purchased Daraprim and made a generic. No one chose to. This is a severely underconsumed drug. It is a rarely used drug because the condition that it treats is ultimately recoverable for the overwhelming majority of the population. And the edge cases, which end up in death that Daraprim may prevent, amount to roughly 300 per year. That is 300 in a country of 350 million. That is less deaths than are caused by falling over onto your dishwasher and dying.
To ensure this, the acquisition deal included the condition that it be removed from wholesalers and pharmacies, preventing anyone from buying it to potentially make a generic copy.
Now, just some guy is going on about this in a vacuum, something he commented on earlier. But it's important to note that, again, after 50 years in past the patent expiration date, they did negotiate for the price of Daraprim, and they paid a premium for it, $55 million for a drug that was not consumed at any real rate. Now, did they have to pay that price? Did they have to make the purchase? No. But Martin Shkreli has some interesting commentary on why he did it. And I apologize for doing this to you, but we have a couple minutes of a Vice video to watch.
It's been a while since I've done this. I'm assuming you go first, right?
I do.
Okay. Cool. I know that much, but beyond that, I might be a little bad. So I hit this every time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you play the Sicilian defense frequently, or?
No, I don't know what that even means.
Okay.
So I don't understand what wine we're drinking, and I don't understand the game that we're playing. So
I just wanted to laugh that Martin is dunking on the female Vice reporter, and she doesn't even know it. That's why I kept this part in.
it's fine.
The Sicilian defense is one of the more popular moves in chess, but it doesn't appear you know how to play chess very well.
Sorry.
No.
Anyway, what do we want to talk about?
I kind of want to know how you got started in the hedge fund.
Okay, I'm going to skip his hedge fund part. We got to get through here. He's teaching her how to play chess. Here's where she asks if he's evil.
I know you know that.
Yeah.
Are you evil?
Am I evil? No.
Also, I've got the closed captioning on, but it is a crime against humanity. It is poorly translated and poorly transcribed, and many of the transcriptions actually say the opposite of what Shkreli is saying. I'm not even joking. It's weird. I don't know if it was automatically done and just that bad, but I don't think so.
I think I'm the opposite of evil, right? I mean, I think that almost it became a thing where I wanted to agree to do it, like participate in it and say, oh yeah, I am evil. Let me be the bad guy. And I started doing funny and fun stuff that maybe even extended that concept of, yeah, sure, I'm evil. I'll be the Bond villain. And but the reality is, you know, you're talking to someone that cares deeply about helping people's lives.
I just want to, the reason I have this in here is because Just Some Guy will go on to, without ever talking to Martin Shkreli or presumably knowing a single thing about him other than what he read on maybe a Wikipedia article or maybe a couple headlines somewhere, he will describe him as greedy, capitalistic, and evil, without considering what Martin Shkreli's motivations may actually be. And this is what I confronted him with on Saturday and trapped him with, despite him having every opportunity to look at the same material that I had done.
So I think the idea that I represent pharma is insane. That I don't. I mean, I don't like most drug companies. I think most of them do a bad job. I think that I'm different. Yeah, I'm a capitalist. I'd love to make an even bigger fortune than I've got now, but I'm not going to do it at the expense of a human life.
Now, notice the thing there said, and I can do it at the expense of a human life. He literally said, but I'm not going to do it at the expense of a human life. Let's listen again.
I'd love to make an even bigger fortune than I've got now, but I'm not going to do it at the expense of a human life. You know, we sell our drugs for $1 to the government. But we sell our drugs for $7.50 a pill to Walmart, to ExxonMobil, to all these big companies, and they pay full price because fuck them. Why shouldn't they? And if I take that money and I'm using it to do research for dying kids, I think I'm a hero, let alone evil.
So how did you?
Okay, let's pay attention to what's going on here. Martin Shkreli sells the drug Daraprim for, allegedly, I'm taking him at his word here. Maybe he is lying. That is certainly possible. But his company sells Daraprim at $1 a pill to the government, which would cover Medicare and Medicaid patients. However, to the large corporate purchasers through their corporate insurance programs, he sells it for $750 a pill. There's a pretty interesting distinction going on. In fact, it's almost like Martin Shkreli's company was doing more of what Just Some Guy thinks is the appropriate action than what I would think is the appropriate action. They are not treating all buyers equally. They are exploiting large corporations and specifically not exploiting individual buyers who are not able to come to the fund or come up with the funds to purchase the product.
You decide that you wanted to purchase Daraprim as opposed to any other drug that treats a rare illness?
Well, my team, you know, looks for drugs to buy. And I've been fascinated by infections for a long time. My sister was dying of an infection. And we didn't know it was an infection. It was this, just this strange symptomatology where she couldn't move. And it was really scary. And so I've always been sort of fascinated by infections because they're alive. They're alive within you. And it's amazing because we need drugs to kill these bugs. And for Daraprim, the opportunity presented itself where we could, buy this medicine. This medicine could have been for sale. So we approached this company and we ended up buying it. So we saw that as an opportunity to make money for our shareholders, but also then build a platform of a company that was focused on rare infections. We knew ahead of time that we were going to raise the price. You know, we paid so much for that medicine relative to the amount of money it was making that we knew that we had to raise the price. It wasn't going to be, and the company selling it to us knew.
Shkreli claims.
So again, the moralistic argument that Martin Shkreli is the ultimate evil for hoodwinking everybody and upping the price of Daraprim overnight is maybe not as clear cut as it talks, as is stated. And this is an interesting aspect when you find someone who does not know what they're talking about starting to discuss an issue far outside of their expertise. And that is where we go back to Just Some Guy. There's actually a lot more really interesting stuff in that video. I would encourage you to watch it. In fact, Martin Shkreli gets a statistic wrong. He is asked by the Vice reporter, and I won't subject you to the entirety of the Vice video, but he is asked by the Vice reporter if his increase of this particular drug price wouldn't he be concerned that that would impact the price of health insurance for these insurance providers, right? Impact premiums. And he says, no, first of all, the pharmaceutical industry is $500 billion. He's actually wrong on that. According to the latest stats available, it was $389 billion out of the total healthcare expenditure in the United States of $3.339 trillion. So we are talking about pharmaceuticals being less than or just over 10% of the total healthcare spending in the United States. He actually says it's closer to 20% of the total healthcare spending. He is wrong on that. But even in his statistics, saying that it is 20% and this drug is a minuscule portion of that 20%, and that raising the price on these pills would have no impact on the overall premium for the average person. He is correct. And he is correct by more than he knows, because he has almost overestimated the value of that impact by approximately 80%. So getting back to just some guy's video so we can finish this at some point tonight.
It could only be purchased through the new Daraprim Direct program.
That is not the only place it could be purchased, but that's a different question.
There was some contention between me and Nick about Martin's intentions. However, it looks like I was right. This was done with the intent of screwing over people who needed the drug.
Notice what he did there. Screwing over people who needed the drug. One other thing that Martin Shkreli goes on to say in this is that anybody who needed the drug Daraprim was able to get it for free if they could not afford it, simply by reaching out to the company or to him directly. Something that he was, prior to being locked up, fully capable of doing, was being able to reach out to Martin Shkreli through email or direct message and tell them that you are not able to afford this drug that you need, and he would personally provide it for free to you. But not only that, he also mentioned that it was available to the government for $1 a pill. The other thing that is covered in the Vice interview that I'll summarize here for just some guy's benefit is the fact that one of the complaints was that this was such a rarely used drug, but hospitals were required to keep some of it around so that just in case of an emergency, even though it was unlikely that any hospital on any given year would see a single case that would require Daraprim. Again, we're not talking about a drug that is used frequently. We're talking about 300 cases annually across the entire United States where Daraprim might be preventative for someone. But that being said, the hospitals were complaining that they did not have this drug in stock and did not need it often, but were required to keep some of it around just in case. So what their company did was provide specialty bottles for hospitals to keep on hand at a reduced price. Again, taking Martin Shkreli at his word, because I have no contravailing evidence to suggest that this is not accurate. But they provided a cheaper alternative for hospitals to keep on hand for the purpose of emergency situations in which Daraprim might be necessary. This, again, obliterates, as basically all of this video has done, just some guy's argument about this. And this is, again, what happens when you argue outside of your knowledge set.
According to Science Mag, presentations from Martin's former company Retrofin, quote, suggested that a closed distribution system could prevent generic competitors from legally obtaining the drugs for bioequivalence studies required for FDA approval of a generic drug.
Could, not did, but could. And it's important to note that Daraprim would have a generic drug developed within 5 years of the purchase of Daraprim.
In short, he tried to block anyone else from making the drug so he'd be the only source and could charge as much as he wanted. He did exactly what I said, exploited people's suffering to make a buck.
That is not what that is not what he did. That is what you have decided that he did. He has not in any way that you can measurably show exploited a single person's suffering. This is an incredible disconnect with the reality of the situation. And just because just some guy delivers it in a flat and reasonable deadpan tone does not make it any more correct, logical, or reasonable. In fact, it can be grossly unreasonable while being delivered in a reasonable way. This is disconnected from factual reality.
Nick says that there was an interview in which Martin Marr claimed that he could use the money to create another drug to treat another illness.
which he does in the Vice interview, although that's not the interview I was talking about, but we don't need to pull it up, but that is what he claimed. And not only that he claimed that he would do it, but that he did.
My position is that it's unethical to suddenly spike the price of the medication people need to survive. It doesn't matter whether he has the right to do it or what he's going to do with the money.
So this is an interesting premise from just some guy, because remember, it's not the act, it's the nature of the act. And this is another disconnect from his original position. His position is that the act itself is not the proper assessment of the morality or the ethics of the action, but rather the nature of the act, the motivating force behind it. I think that spiking up the price on large corporations with bottomless pockets for the purpose of developing a medicine for people who do not have that opportunity might actually be somewhat of a good motive. I don't know. I haven't thought through to assess if that is the right thing, but it's kind of interesting to suggest that the nature of the act does not apply in this scenario, because that is much more convenient for just some guy's argument, or he didn't consider the nature of the other act or any nature other than what he had presupposed it to be. The other thing to point out about that Vice interview, and again, I would encourage anybody to watch it. It's very interesting. He also is trolling the lady 80% of the time, which is really funny. But the other thing that's important to mention is that, according to Martin Shkreli, Daraprim is not the safest drug. Again, remembering this is a pharmaceutical created in 1940 with no subsequent upgrades. And part of his company's motivation for purchasing Daraprim was to use the existing data, literature, and physical essence of Daraprim to try and create a more effective drug with less harmful side effects. Again, I'm taking Martin Shkreli at his word because I have not seen contravailing evidence to support an alternative, but I'm not saying there's not one out there. This is just what he has explained. And as the CEO of a pharmaceutical company, I think he might be more qualified in that field than I am, although, you know, I'm willing to be wrong on that as well.
It's the ethics of what he's doing. And yes, I do realize the pointlessness of arguing ethics with a lawyer. Nevertheless,
I realize the pointlessness of arguing ethics with a lawyer. Remember, we are not using straw men or ad hominem attacks in just some guy's video. And I only will bring this up every single time to illustrate the disingenuous nature of his very calm and reasoned response. It is all based on premises, rules that he established that he refuses to follow. And he has been called out in the comments on it several times. But I would like to, since again, this is an element where just some guy does not seem to have any sort of particular knowledge base, educate him on lawyer ethics. Lawyers actually have required ethics classes that we have to do to maintain our license. Not only that, we are subject to a review board, a specific review board that reviews our behavior and demands that we act in an ethical way. In fact, our First Amendment rights are lightly curtailed from the rest of the population. And should we breach our ethical obligations while exercising our First Amendment obligations, we can have our licenses removed. So to suggest that lawyers are incapable or unknowledgeable about ethics is dishonest, disingenuous, and ad hominem, and frankly, ignorant. But you do you and play on stereotypes about lawyers all you want. I will call lawyers the worst people on earth all day. I'm not suggesting that they're a special class, but let me just posit to you that the people who are best at navigating ethics in the negative are ones that understand the ethical rules most clearly and are able to get around them in the most effective ways.
It's the nature of the act that makes this wrong, not the act itself. So as Nick said in the stream, the company did make some adjustments, although they weren't the altruistic gesture he made them out to be.
I didn't make them out to be altruistic. Altruism is not a virtue in my book. Altruism is an ethical set that I do not agree to. Certain individual acts by people could be altruistic or motivated by altruism, but ascribing altruism to people and their actions is not something that I do, nor is it how I judge anyone. And I would never want people to judge me by my altruistic acts. And hopefully you don't actually know about the overwhelming majority of quote unquote altruism that I engage in. I take a more Ayn Randian approach to altruism, and I think that the ethics of altruism is a poison upon society, one that can be used to force people into betraying their own property rights for the quote unquote wants of others.
The company only did it after it faced massive backlash over its price gouging. According to the New York Times, the company refused to lower the list price, but offered up to a 50% discount to hospitals and pledged no one would be denied access. However, the article points out that many patients continue to need the drug after leaving the hospital, so the discount only goes so far. The company did say it would reduce the copays for commercially insured patients to no more than $10 and would donate money to a charity to help Medicare patients with their copays. They also said they would offer the drug for free to qualified uninsured patients with incomes at or below 500% of the federal poverty level.
Incomes at or below 500% of the federal poverty level. Just Some Guy is glossing the measures that the company took to make Daraprim affordable for people who could not afford it. But 500% of the federal poverty level is incomes in excess of $100,000 annually. I don't know if we can possibly overstate how incorrect Just Some Guy is on these issues. I just don't know what else to say.
Level. That seems like a lot of trouble that could have been avoided by not spiking the price so damn high.
The other issue with Just Some Guy's analysis is that he is taking the journalistic interpretation of what happened as the gospel truth, which is maybe sometimes not the complete story.
The company had the right to do it, but the way they did it was highly unethical and likely resulted in Martin Shkreli getting more attention from the feds, who were investigating him for securities fraud.
I don't think that this actually had anything to do with his security fraud indictment. In fact, I think they were looking for an indictment against Martin Shkreli that would go along with the securities fraud indictment, and that they attempted to get him to Capitol Hill to entrap him into using his own words to cause an indictment. And I only think that because the federal government has done that to healthcare and health services providers over and over and over, charging them with crimes that are not actually illegal. And if anybody wants more information on that, read a book called Cardiac Arrest, which describes that exact situation. However, they were unable to do so, especially when confronted with the reality that every other pharmaceutical company does the exact same thing Martin Shkreli did, but we're not allowed to talk about Moderna, Merck, Pfizer, or any of these other companies. And certainly prosecutors don't want to go after little guys for the same criminal acts that would be imposed upon others. But the big problem ultimately with why Martin Shkreli was not charged with anything related to Daraprim was because nothing that he did was illegal. Not only was it not illegal, it was industry standard.
Fortunately, his dick move caused other companies to research ways to provide an alternative to the needed medication and offer it at an affordable price. I'm sure Nick will say that this is a free market working things out, which is true, except it's
if I would say it and it's true, what's the problem?
Doing it at other people's expense.
Interestingly, if I make a PlayStation 5, or well, let's say I'm not Sony, so I make a Gay Station 5, my own invention, a Gay Station 5, and I put it out on the market, and it is a video game system that runs games, only homosexual games, for example. And I sell that thing to the LGBTQ Twitter crowd, and I make every game is woke and wonderful, right? Let's say I go ahead and do that, and I charge someone a price to acquire the Gay Station 5. I have done it at their expense. This is a non-starter, a non-sequitur, and a non-argument.
And I'm sure Nick's response would be, yeah, tough. which suggests maybe he was born in the wrong time. The South could have used him during the 1850 Compromise.
Remember that we are not using any straw men or ad hominem attacks in Just Some Guy's argument, like perhaps suggesting that someone might be in favor of the ownership of Black people because they don't agree with price controls in the 21st century. And if you want to know how a calm and measured response does not always mean a rational argument, I will present to you this section of Just Some Guy's video. And the fact that he would accuse me of supporting in any way the ownership of people is morally and ethically reprehensible and disgusting, especially considering that the ultimate argument of a capitalist system is first a right to your own body as your own sole and sacred property right, not to be divested except by your express consent. So to represent me in this way is absolutely disgusting and dishonest and really, really pathetic, because it goes below the level of banter and into the level of a personal moral character attack that I think is a little bit dishonest. I don't know.
This isn't about whether you have the legal right to do something. This is about the ethics of what you're doing. It's that principle that allows me to be free. If we followed Nick's logic, me and everyone who looks like me would still be enslaved because no one has the right to take other people's property.
Yes, including you. Including you being your own property, not someone else's, not subject to the ownership of someone else. That is a violation of your property right. Just as you owning me would be a violation of my own property right. But remember, you deal with far leftists all the time. I don't know. Maybe their arguments are rubbing off on you.
This idea that the free market is this lawless good is defied by reality.
Who argued that the free market is a lawless good? In fact, I must remind people we are not making straw man arguments in Just Some Guy's video.
Yes, the free market may result in a company creating better kerosene, as Nick mentioned about standardized oil.
Standard oil. The fact that you still, in producing a thought out and produced edited video, could not come up with the appropriate company name for the biggest, one of the single biggest monopoly cases that exists in the United States, and why Standard Oil was actually important to people because it was the first kerosene product to stop killing people. Just getting the name right would have helped.
It also results in Big Tobacco producing a product that kills its users and then lying about its cancer-causing and addictive properties, marketing that product to children, and trying to stop anyone from finding out.
Notice what he did there. He suggested that a free market was one in which someone could misrepresent the product and its adverse effects to the free market. That is not a free market. That is a marketplace of lies and deception and fraud, which was rectified when it was discovered. But it's important to note, I guess I should add, that the people who discovered that the cigarette companies were lying, the people who discovered that was not the government and was not the law. It was actually the market. It was life insurance companies who realized that the smokers were dying at exorbitant rates at a much younger age than anyone else. It's interesting how the market, again, was able to correct a problem that the government did not even know existed. But a reminder again that we are not bringing up straw men in Just Some Guy's video.
It results in companies building private prisons that hire fewer guards, provide less training for those guards, offer little protection for the inmates, and pays off judges and prosecutors to get more convictions so they can have more inmates so they can make more money.
Addressing the issue of private prisons, yet again, he brings up blatantly unlawful activity of bribery, that bribery which results in the deprivation of someone else's rights for a particular motive, an unlawful act in and of itself. But let's not forget where private prisons derive their ability to do business. They must, by necessity, contract with the state to operate. So these private prisons are railed against over and over and over again, and yet it is the state that funds, approves, and oversees the private prisons. In fact, private prisons are often staffed by state employees or state-approved programs. The training programs that he alludes to are substandard. They are also approved by the states which are implementing the private prison. You have a government-private partnership, which is actually not a free market or capitalist solution. But again, we're not bringing up straw man arguments in Just Some Guy's videos, because I don't remember mentioning private prisons on Saturday or any subsequent stream.
And of course, there should be no laws, rules, or regulations managing any of this.
Yet again, we're not bringing up straw men. If you have a state corporate sponsorship, I think the rule of law should be extra strict, because you're restricting a government action with a private entity sitting as proxy for the government action. And guess what? The Supreme Court agrees that the state actor doctrine would apply to a private prison because it is operating in the sole purview of government, which means that private prisons are subject to the Bill of Rights, whereas other private companies are not. It's almost like this system actually exists in America, and it's not at all what we are discussing, nor have I issued a problem with it. In fact, I have advocated on behalf of tighter regulations on public-private partnerships that are masquerading as private entities when they end up being government proxies. But again, we're not bringing up straw man arguments on Just Some Guy's video.
The company should be allowed to do whatever they want and face no accountability to anyone other than themselves and the free market. That system of such high ethics and morality that it acted in the case of big tobacco. Oh, wait. I agree that the solution...
Oh, wait. The market actually did act in the case of big tobacco. Again, faster than the government did.
To greed and exploitation isn't to regulate the economy into oblivion, but it also isn't to allow people to go unchecked to the point that they're dominating everyone else because they have the right to do whatever they want.
See, interestingly, the market will check. The market always checks. The thing about monopolies, right, is they have the ability to prevent competition. The way they prevent competition is by undercutting their own price. They sell temporarily at a loss to keep the competition away. And then after the competition is gone, they have to return to equilibrium price to deliver goods. You may not like the fact that they snuff out competition, and we could have a discussion about anti-competitive practices and things like that. However, painting the market as a non-correcting entity that allows the full exploitation of the entire consumer base is actually inaccurate. Most often, the consumer is the one who benefits from the competitive war against up-and-coming monopoly competitors. And when monopolists drive prices too high, it encourages competition from someone else who can come in and say, I can do that at a much lower price. And then they are able to give that price to the consumer, causing the monopolist to lower their price in reaction to the market. Now, it may not happen as fast as some people like, but interestingly, it often happens faster than the legislative process is able to do so. And as an example, I will go ahead and point out that legislative price controls didn't stop Standard Oil. The trust busting did before they were able to actually inflate the price to unattainable levels. But let's not deal with reality. Remember, we are not bringing up straw man arguments in Just Some Guy's video.
And domination is ultimately where this leads. Back to Nick's wingman Shkreli.
I don't know what domination he's talking about, but saying that it is ultimately where this leads is incorrect. There are all sorts of checks. And for one, I have not advocated against any intervention in the free market. I have merely advocated against price controls on Purell and Daraprim in the free market. But alas, we don't want to get too specific here because that would be very inconvenient for Just Some Guy's argument.
His goal was to stop anyone from being able to make Daraprim or a drug like it, so he'd be the sole source for that drug.
I hate to keep stopping this, but Just Some Guy is actually overlooking a different ethical responsibility that Martin Shkreli had. The ethics of an owner to the shareholder. His company is a semi-public or publicly traded company. I'm not sure if it was semi-public or if he just had private shareholders. I don't know. I guess I could look it up. It doesn't really matter. Either way, he is acting as if Martin Shkreli is the sole beneficiary of all of this, when that is not necessarily true. Martin Shkreli actually has investors and shareholders, and he has an ethical obligation to make the maximum amount of money for those shareholders within the bounds of the law. And if he does not act in such a way that will make the maximum amount of profit, he is actually liable to those shareholders. He has a fiduciary duty, a legally imposed duty, and an ethically imposed duty. Again, this is the problem with just citing ethics in the vagueness of discussion, is that what ethical set are we talking about? But talking about Martin Shkreli as if he's a sole actor isn't actually accurate.
That's not just about him making money. That's also about him seeking power. It's no different than saying we should put all our resources together to help each other and then positioning yourself as the only one who gets to dole them out.
Interestingly, it's significantly different from that. Not only is it significantly different from that, it's entirely worlds apart to suggest that creating a product or system and charging people an amount that is higher than what just some guy likes to aggregate resources for yourself in your self-interested ambition is the same thing as duping people into creating a communal pot and then taking control of it, which is the action of a communist. Those two actions are not only not comparable, they are diametrically opposed to each other. They are the opposite. One is motivated by a rational self-interest. The other is motivated by a deception to the community to extract resources adverse to their property rights rather than based on their free choice.
So when it comes to people like Nick, if they want me to believe in their free market capitalist utopia, they need to make sure that the shit that happened to Parler can't happen again.
Oh, okay. So now I must remember that we are not bringing up straw man arguments in just some guy's videos, but apparently the stuff that happened to Parler not happening again is somehow incumbent on the market itself. I see. I'm not, since I actually didn't listen to this part of the video, I'm not actually sure what he's talking about here or how that is a response to free market capitalism. But having government-private partnerships with Amazon's back end to the internet doesn't necessarily scream free market capitalism to me, nor does having Amazon enforce government policy on private companies through a nebulous use of their contracts, one that is still under a lawsuit in Washington state, seem like that is a product of the free market. I don't think that Amazon was necessarily acting to create a monopoly over Parler, a product that Amazon does not dabble in. But if he's saying that Amazon acted on behalf of Twitter, he may in fact be correct. According to Amazon, however, there is no evidence of this. And according to Parler's complaint, there is tenuous evidence of this, but not much more. We'll have to wait for discovery to see how that happens. Laying this one at the feet of the free market, though, is a little bit dishonest to me. But that being said, we have a Federal Communications and a Federal Trade Commission. We have regulatory bodies, and those regulatory bodies that should be preventing this in the non-utopia that just some guy claims that I don't want, didn't seem to prevent the activity. So I'm not quite sure why I need to present capitalism as a standard that is not lived up to by the government regulatory structure that just some guy seems to be advocating. But again, I think we passed the point of honesty and consistency in just some guy's video a long time ago.
That was your free market being shut the fuck down.
It actually was nothing of the sort, but you do you.
Because these ever so altruistic capitalistic corporations who just want to create a platform for free speech didn't want the competition. It would appear that
Yes, you're correct. They were anti-competitive. And I would point out that the government regulation didn't stop them. What's interesting is that a completely free market might have. but we'll never know because we don't live in a completely free market.
Their almighty capitalism isn't really about freedom, but about money and power. They don't need to get the pussy. They are the pussies because they're too afraid to admit.
Just a reminder that we are not using ad hominem attacks or any sort of straw man argument in Just Some Guy's video.
What they're actually about. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.
I can answer that question. Not very much about this subject. Well, there you go, guys. That took a lot longer than I thought it would take. And I did not use most of the resources that I have. I actually have citations real quick. I should pull up for some of these things. We do have the citation right here for healthcare spending. Healthcare spending in the United States is high and continues to increase, as does spending for prescription drugs in particular. In 2016, the U.S. spent $3.337 billion. 3,337 billion or 3.337 trillion, which is 17.9% of the gross domestic product on national health expenditures, of which 329 billion was spent on prescription drugs. So there's a citation for you there. I have more on the 17,700 bottles, but I really don't think it's necessary. I think we've adequately gone through and thoroughly deconstructed Just Some Guy's argument. And I don't know how else to do it. Look, we had a fun, shouty argument on Saturday, and then I followed up with discussions on Sunday and last night. I don't know if I did any others, but or maybe it was Monday and last night. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. I did follow up the discussion. It was not actually to dump on Just Some Guy. I hope he didn't take it that way. I followed up the discussion because I have been on a kick talking about liberty, and I keep running into people who misunderstand the fundamental principles of liberty and freedom. I thought it would be instructive to go ahead and use current arguments that people may have seen to expound upon these topics. And if Just Some Guy took that personally, I do honestly apologize. That was not in any way my intention. But as he chose to deliver a rebuttal to my argument, I wanted to go ahead and put out a rebuttal to his, which I found to be 1, wholly dishonest, and 2, completely unfounded, and 3, ignorant on basically every issue of fact or law, despite being delivered in a way to make it look like a reasonable and rational argument. It was anything but that. And you know, you guys are the audience. You guys can look at both of these with less of a bias than either Just Some Guy or I will. All I can do is present my side of this argument in the same way that he did, except I would do it live because that's my style, and that is not a slam on any other method of doing it. So thank you for dealing with 2 hours of that. I do need to go ahead and read a couple super chats, and then the Melinda Scott decision. Oh my. We've got, or not the Melinda Scott decision, the Melinda Scott paperwork. We've got some of that. Maybe I can get into it just before we go ahead and drop into Twitch for a movie night tonight. So let's see. What do we got here? Also, if you want to know, I did this for another performative purpose as well. There is a distinct difference between getting into an impromptu argument on a live stream and having fun with it and yelling insults back and forth and doing that, with actually researching and producing an argument. And to put it lightly, I spent maybe an hour today putting together this, the resources for this argument. Most of it was formulated in my head. I don't know how long I spent, but to put a point on it, And I am not some premium tier lawyer or anything like that. I would never claim to be. I'm just me. I am just me. You will always get what you see. I am consistent, and I try to be as honest as I can muster, based on my own, perhaps I forget something or whatever. But we are trained to put hours and hours and hours of work into constructing arguments to deconstruct the opposition in the most biased and unfair ways possible. Please, if you're going to enter into an argument with a lawyer, I would suggest that you bring a better game than you brought. Because if you really, really had pissed me off to a higher level, I guess, I could have spent a very long time typing up a script and bringing in more citations and really thoroughly debunking everything you said. Could have made blog posts and tweeted to it and all of that stuff. That's what we're trained to do. If you're going to bring an argument against a lawyer on something, bring a better argument, not one that is internally inconsistent and externally incoherent. Not to toot my own horn because, I don't know. Maybe you guys all hated it. Maybe everybody on the internet likes just some guy's argument better. I'm sure his video will actually get more distribution than mine because it's short. But that I've said my piece, and anybody who wants to find it can go ahead and find it. Trucker Rob says, "Hey, Rackets, 2 months into my diet, the scale says I'm down about 8 pounds. Can always use more fat hate." Trucker Rob, the scale only says you're down 8 pounds because you cracked the glass with your giant girth and the needle got stuck on it. Okay? Lose more weight, fatty. Kyra says, "We live in a society." And Kyra also says, hashtag F society. And Kyra says, hack the planet! Hack the planet! I love that movie. Shinobu Tezuka says, "No one died from not having their hands sanitized." End of argument. And yes, not to revisit the veto thing, but that was a big issue with Vito's argument as well. People are going to die. Who's going to die from this? Who listened to Alex Jones and is going to die because of something Alex Jones said? That many people. Lorgar Apologist says, "The power of co-ass prevail. Uno reverse card. The Changer Lord comes. You will now read all super chats in Trump voice and all Trump requests as the Lemon Lord in Trump voice. Metal boxes." There you go. Thornock Gaming says, "I just started your stream. One thing I enjoy about watching you is that you use your writing background to explain how words and sentence structures make or break an argument or a point. It is pretty important." Passable Gamer says, "A short list of sanitizer alternatives: 60% alcohol, rubbing alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, 60% aftershave, no rinse cleansing foam, wet wipes, soap and water. Just some guy's premise is absurd and devoid of reality." Jason McConnell says, "I don't know who this guy with the Hitler Youth haircut is, but I'd like to stand around the bubbler with him sharing hot dish recipes and hot take anti-commie takes." Oh, that's good. And then Justin Gain says, "Hi, Nick. I would like to know your stance on constitutional monarchy. In simpler terms, if Games Workshop or if GW become king and John Adams ran government with no political, George Washington became king. Sorry. I thought it was Games Workshop. Super nerd. And John Adams ran government with no political parties and run it like a business." That actually, I think, is kind of what people expected. The one way to describe the American executive branch is that you have a king that potentially could be unelected every 4 years. The expectation was that when electing a president, they would, with again George Washington being the prominent man to do so, that he would be elected and reelected until he died. That was the idea. George Washington sort of trumped that by being either noble or virtuous or something, or as Stefan Molyneux would suggest, being lazy and not wanting the burden of presidency when he could just live out his life being rich. I don't know the answer to that, but I am not a fan of a constitutional monarchy. I think progressing past that was the right thing to do. So I hope that helps answer your question. I don't think a constitution can actually create a functional monarchy, because a monarch by necessity has too much power. And monarchy is also enshrined in these ideas of lineage-based ownership of property. I didn't bring this up. Again, I know a lot of property law. I know a lot about property law. I know more than I ever wanted to know about property law. But property rights, in essence, were created somewhere around the 14th century in England, because prior to the inception of property rights for the plebeians, the king owned all of the property, and the king's offspring would own all of the property. All of it. And it would be granted to people by grant of the king. He would explicitly bestow land and title upon people. The problem became that people were never entitled to maintain ownership of that property. They did not have a property right of ownership. And so a system started to develop where when the king granted land, it would actually pass from person to person. The reason this was a problem was that the monarch, who tightly controlled the legal structure — let's just remember that monarchs are governments — the monarch was able to grant property to a person, and when that person dies, their spouse and or offspring were not entitled to the same right of access. So they would be thrown out, and some other person could be put in. This applied all the way down from little tenement farmers all the way up to dukes and archdukes, who would have the same issue happen. If they were not in favor of the king, once the person who was granted title expired, the title expired with them and was not transferable. Property rights was a system of fairness that was developed when we recognized that people should be inherently able to own something. And then as that developed, the ownership of the self became a thing. Now, sure, there were lots of countries that did not quickly adopt the right of ownership to the self when it applied to other people. Slavery was a thing in basically every society developing throughout the Middle and Late Middle Ages. That was just the reality of the situation. It applied, the right of bodily ownership applied to them. It did not apply so much to the slave, although I will say that was actually still subject to the king. And that is why they had such a messed up legal system in which a monarch could theoretically put someone in the stockade for as long as they want for any minor infraction. There was no recognition of property rights. It was not really until the Constitution of the United States that property rights would be enshrined in the way that we understand them, to protect not only your real and personal property, but literally yourself as your own property. And we would see that it would take another 150 years after that, 160, 70 years after that, to extend those property rights to Black people and otherly colored slaves as well. So, not to give an essay on property rights in the founding of the country, but it is an important background. I didn't want to spend a lot of time during the actual discussion of just some guy's video on it. I thought I had done enough. Trump Willis is my name, says commies seem to always forget that just because he bought them instead of produced them does not mean he did not put his hard labor into making the money to buy such product and flip it. Has anyone seen Storage Wars? The thing with property rights and monetary investment is money is nothing more than a reflection and manifestation of your labor. Whatever that labor may be and whatever capital you may be able to procure, money is a representation. It is a fiction. A fiat currency is a fiction. It is just something to put an idea of tangibility and representation behind what is otherwise present inherently. I have created X amount of labor units. Those labor units are represented by dollars in a bank account. Interestingly, of course, we are getting more and more away from the physical representation and more into a digital representation, which is probably more accurate. There is no need to have a physical dollar bill for most things today, because physical dollar bills are cumbersome and require someone else to produce that item. They require resources. They are the waste in the system. In theory, In theory, okay? I'm not arguing that fiat currency is great and digital currency is great. I'm just saying that in a perfect utopia, to use that stupid straw man, in a perfect utopia, a digital representation of currency is much less resource intensive than the physical production and tracking of currency. And so it's an interesting representation of what value you bring to the table, what your capital representation is. That is produced typically by labor. And then that is a representation of your value, and you are able to trade a representation of your value to someone else for goods, because that good is a representation of their value, and they can take your fiat currency as substitute. So anyway, yeah. But yes, very good point. You put labor into making your representation of capital. Mandy Curvaceous says, hello, Nick. Heart, should I make a cherry cheesecake, cinnamon buns, or a 7-Up cake for this weekend? Cinnamon buns. Cinnamon buns. I need a good lawyer to decide for me. Well, ask someone else, but I would say cinnamon buns if you're asking me. Let's see. We have some justice chats. Maybe I should pull up Melinda. Let's see if we can get Melinda's stupid. Oh, this is 16 pages. And she wrote all of them. Okay. We're going to start on Melinda. We may have to push Melinda ultimately. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to misrepresent things. I just really did not expect the construction of the argument to go as long as it did. I don't know if we're going to go through this whole document, but Melinda Scott. Last we left off, Janie Jersh's lawyer had filed a motion for an appeal bond. That motion for an appeal bond suggested that if Melinda was going to be allowed to appeal in forma pauperis and not pay anything, but subsequently increase the cost of litigation for Josh, that she would go ahead and put up a bond amount sufficient to justify the appeal, so that she couldn't appeal it, lose, and then claim, well, I don't have any money, so sucks that he had to spend $20,000 on this appeal. I didn't have to spend anything, and he can't recover it from me. So this is plaintiff's reply in response to defendant's motion for extension of time to file document, defendant's motion for an appeal bond. Okay, wait a minute here. I need to, oh, damn it. I need to see one more thing. This lady is crazy. So she has this thing. She also has a memorandum in support, which is only 4 pages. Typically, your motion would be short and your memorandum would be much longer. Her memorandum, she seems to have done it backwards. I'm not going to look at her memorandum right now. It's just bad. Okay. Comes now. I'm going to come. The plaintiff, Melinda Scott, and replies to defendant's motion for extension of time to file documents and motion to require an appeal bond. An accompanying memorandum of law is attached. That's the motion right there. She should sign it, and that's it. And then all of this stuff should go into her memorandum of law. Appeal a matter of right. Plaintiff Scott maintains a constitutional right to appeal without need to explain herself. The plaintiff does not need to defend her constitutional right to appeal. That is a right granted to the plaintiff by the U.S. Constitution and the federal rules of civil procedure. There's no citations to this, but generally she's correct. It is an abuse of process and completely absurd to the defendant's counsel to use pleadings to expect the plaintiff to have to use up her time and the court's time defending her right to appeal, a right she holds by way of the Constitution. This is actually not true. This is incorrect. The other party is allowed to question your motives here. And though you may have a right to appeal, that is only a subset that the appeal is done with a proper purpose. And the purpose is a bona fide, or not a bona fide, but a genuine belief that the appeal is not only your right, but the appeal will prevail. If it is a bad faith appeal, which does exist, a bad faith appeal is not an exercise of your rights. It's an exercise of the opposite. And courts can assess that, and in some cases would issue a motion on the court's motion or an order to show cause, to show why you are exercising this right in good faith, because they may question your motives. Defendant Moon, by counsel, cites no case law for his legal conclusion that a litigant explained themselves for exercising their right to appeal. He did cite the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure specifically on that. Defendant Moon's counsel seeks to interfere with Plaintiff Scott's constitutional rights. Interesting. Plaintiff Scott denies that the notice of appeal has anything to do with an intention to continue to escalate Mr. Moon's costs. Plaintiff Scott has made no such statement anywhere indicating that. I actually don't know if that's true. And in fact, Moon alleged that somewhere in the thousand page history of Melinda Scott's Kiwi Farms thread that she keeps expanding, that there are indications that she was doing this for an improper purpose. It's absurd for defendant's counsel to even reach such a conclusion because he hasn't even seen the contents of Plaintiff Scott. Oh no! Oh no, this apostrophe. It's a catastrophe of Plaintiff Scott's appeal yet. It is another false accusation intended to stall her right to appeal. Nope, the appeal is actually separate. You can go ahead and for one, stalling the right to appeal for the process of determining whether an appeal bond is necessary, you can still file your appeal. You can do it and file it, but they may not accept it if the appeal bond is required. So it doesn't actually stall anything. Abusive process by defendant's counsel. Defendant, by counsel, makes an allegation that the plaintiff's burdening the judiciary. The exercise of a taxpayer and person's constitutional rights cannot be construed as a burden to the judiciary. Actually, they can be. They absolutely can be when they're undertaken in bad faith. If I file every single week a new lawsuit against Melinda Scott for negligent infliction of emotional distress, and I take the next 50 weeks, so 1 year, and every year I file in a different jurisdiction, a different motion for a negligent or a different lawsuit for negligent infliction of emotional distress against Melinda Scott, I have a technical right to do so. However, I would be doing so in bad faith, and that would be very apparent, and it would be a burden to the judiciary to resolve those bad faith lawsuits. So it can be construed as a burden to the judiciary. She's absolutely wrong on this. As a taxpayer and citizen of the U.S., the plaintiff has a constitutional right to file lawsuits. Yes, and those rights can be curtailed when they are abused in a bad faith manner. Defendant's counsel cites no case law to support his legal conclusion. The exercise of a taxpayer's right is a burden to the judiciary. Melinda, stop. Melinda, stop. This lady has never paid taxes in her entire welfare-riddled life. Like, can we stop with the pretend that Melinda Scott is a taxpayer? Melinda, you're a net tax consumer. You have been forever, and you probably will be forever because you can't put your time towards anything productive, and instead you will sit and sue people forever. You are not a taxpayer. You are a burden on the American populace. Defendant Moon's repetitive motions asking for extensions of time are a real burden to the judiciary. Nope. In fact, a motion for an extension of time is a relief to the judiciary almost always. If he would exercise diligence to file pleadings and motions on time, there would be less paperwork for everyone here. I guess theoretically that's correct, but you don't have to oppose the motion to extend time. And the court has typically, outside of repeated bad faith requests, the court will typically grant the motion to extend time. It's silly. In fact, every filing after the entry of default on November 16, 2020 has been stirred up by the simple fact that defendant Moon, who had complete constructive notice doesn't exist, of a lawsuit failed to act in accordance with his responsibilities. There is no legal reality of constructive notice of the lawsuit. You have to have actual notice. That actual notice is guided by the rules of civil procedure in the state and federal government. There is no constructive notice outside of a specific rule that would allow constructive notice, and none of those would apply in this situation. He knew there was a lawsuit 2 days after it was filed. He decided to do nothing. He had no obligation to, you dummy. Then when a default was entered, this is what she's salty about. She was dumb enough to think that she won on a default judgment on bogus service. She's like, I'm going to get $1 million from $50,000 or something. I'm going to get $50,000 from Joshua Moon. I win. Russell Greer has done the same thing on several occasions. She defaulted. I'm going to get $100 million from Taylor Swift trying to charge because she defaulted. These people are addicted to this. You have to understand that this is a disease. This is an illness in their minds. They are addicted to the power of litigation. And that's why they engage in frivolous, pro se, poor person litigation all the time. They think they will beat the system with magic words. They won't, but they think they will, and then they get hooked. If I just reword it a little bit, if I just do it right this one time. And then the really nasty thing here is that Melinda got her payoff. She got her legal orgasm. She fingered her legal clitoris so hard that she actually got a default judgment. She's like, yes, I win. And then the reality of the federal rules of service and then the federal rules of vacating erroneous default judgments came to hit home, and she's so mad about it. When a default was entered, he created a long string of paperwork for everyone involved, even under this very day, only because you keep opposing it, which of course you should. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't blame him for doing the legal process when you're doing the same. Defendant Moon's counsel had adequate time between August 31st, 2021, September 8th, 2021, the date of his motion for an extension of time, to draft a motion for anything else he wanted. The amazing thing is this motion for an extension of time is 7 days prior to how long he actually had. It was the most reasonable and non-burdensome request. Hey, I have 7 days left to do this. If the judge turns it down, I could put together the thing, but it's a little bit difficult, and we would ask for a little extension. So he gets an extension. And again, extensions in court are granted constantly, all the time. All the time. I got an extension in a felony case. In a felony case, I got an extension because, well, I had booked a trip, and the court administrator booked the hearing on a day when I was on a plane because, they sent me an email with a list of dates. And while I was consulting with my client, they decided to book it before I'd gotten back to them. And it turns out they booked me on a plane. This is a felony case with prison time potentially involved. And I sent back, I said, I'm on a plane. We need to extend that. And they did. No problem. Of course they did. It's almost like the courts are used to things taking longer, not shorter. His filing of the motion for an extension of time, which came only after he was electronically emailed the plaintiff's notice of appeal. Well, that was your mistake for filing that within the 14-day window, was obviously prompted by his discomfort with the plaintiff's notice of appeal. First of all, that's fine. Second of all, you have no idea that that's true. He is attempting to use a motion for an extension of time as a punitive strike against the plaintiff exercising her right of appeal. This appears to be in violation of Federal Rule 11. It is nothing of the sort, you dumb fucking moron. It is absolutely within his right to make a simple request for an extension of time for the first time on this potential motion, which he still had 7 days to turn in if the court turns him down. But it is an abusive process and completely absurd for the defendant's counsel to try and stall, discourage, and intimidate the plaintiff into not appealing. Nothing of the sort being done in an extension of time request there in this course of conduct and manner that he has behaved in filing these two recent motions. Defendant Moon's counsel projecting his own abusive process onto the plaintiff. Defendant Moon's counsel has repeatedly tried to accuse the plaintiff of abusing the court process when it is him, in fact, doing that very thing to the plaintiff to gaslight and intimidate her out of her rights. This has happened more than once in this case. So there you go. Then she has a cite to Rule 24A3A of the Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure. Just as a 2. Okay. Legal standard of rule. This is what she put in her memorandum of law also. Defendant Moon by counsel cites Rule 24A3A in his motion to require an appeal bond as a basis for his motion. However, his motion does not comply with the legal standards of Rule 24A3A. An accompanying memorandum of law demonstrating the defendant has no legal basis for asserting Rule 24A3A is attached. Okay, got it. Malice of Defendant Moon. Do you want to know malice? I'll show you malice. You've never seen malice before. Here we go. Sorry, I was fixing some windows. As noted in her complaint, docket number 2, and subsequent filings in this case, Defendant Moon runs a sadistic, malicious website called KiwiFarms.net, in which he engages in a pattern of inflicting social abuse and group cyberstalking to attack the people he's actively victimizing on his website. Honey, all those claims were dismissed. The court doesn't believe you. It is Defendant Moon who is the malicious behavior in this case, not Plaintiff Scott, except the malicious behavior you just alleged was dismissed by the court. It says no. It says the opposite. Defendant Moon's repetitive and meritless accusations against plaintiff. In his motion for an extension of time to file document, Defendant Moon by counsel states that there is reason to believe that this litigation has been conducted in bad faith and that the plaintiff has acted in violation of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 11B. His repetitive and meritless accusation, which has appeared in multiple of his pleadings and is once again presented here, is devoid of any factual details to support his allegation. Further, the legal standard for evaluating a plaintiff's complaint is that in evaluating a complaint, the court accepts as true all well-pleaded facts and construes those facts in light most favorable to plaintiff. She has missed the fact that the court did that and still found that she lost. You got to take it up with the appeals, lady. You're not going to win at this level. The court at this level disagreed with you. You can disagree with the court. That's the appeals court's job to deal with, but you have lost here. Defendant Moon is not a victim. Defendant Moon by counsel speaks of years-long crusade of litigation. Defendant Moon is not a victim. If he didn't want to be sued, he could have not engaged in years-long course of conduct aimed at socially abusing the plaintiff through a sadistic, malicious, and socially deviant behavior. Interestingly enough, this is often the cry. This is often the cry of people who do this. Well, if they had just not engaged in their rights, they wouldn't be sued. Says the loser of a case where it was determined that the other person's rights were followed and that they didn't violate the plaintiff's right. They did not harm the plaintiff for whatever reason. They say, well, if they didn't want to be sued, they could have not done the behavior that the court just said they were legally able to do. Very weird. Defendant Moon's behavior is outside the bounds of a civilized society. Court disagreed. Common decency. Court disagreed. And well out of range of a person with well-adjusted social skills. Everybody agrees that Defendant Moon has no well-adjusted social skills. What are you talking about? Defendant Moon is a feeder autism who watches dummies on the internet for that's his kicks. He's not socially well adjusted. That's why I like talking to him. Defendant Moon's false claims of victimization. Assumption of risk by Defendant Moon. There exists a legal principle in the world called the assumption of risk. A person has a duty not to engage in a behavior that may result in certain circumstances. Nope. That's a misstatement of the assumption of risk. What are you talking about? The assumption of risk would state that if you either explicitly or in some cases implicitly assume the risk of an activity, you have therefore assumed the liability and absolved others of a portion, if not all, of that liability. If I get into a car on a racetrack, I am assuming the risks of me driving or riding in a race car, which in some cases may result in a crash. And outside of the wanton negligence or reckless disregard for my safety of the owner of the racetrack, I will most likely be liable for any injuries which occur to my assumed risk. This is not the same as going online and saying Melinda Scott is a fat retard. That's a completely different thing. There is no assumption of the risk. In April 2017, plaintiff Scott sent an email to defendant Moon advising him he did not have permission to use her name and photo for his business. Well, but he did, though, under principles of fair use. If he had removed plaintiff's name and photo from his for-profit business website, there would be 0% chance of any litigation against him. Nope, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. Just removing her name and photo would not have prevented litigation, or there's no way to say there'd be a 0% chance. There'd just be a lower percent chance. When he chose to keep her name and photo up on his website, which is his right, he took the risk of being sued. He assumed that risk himself and owns a personal responsibility for his actions. Defendant Moon's predicament, his own fault. Defendant Moon by counsel gripes that he will face an uphill battle to collect from the plaintiff. That's because you're poor. You're a poor. Defendant Moon purposely attacks members of society who are not able to afford or hire legal representation as part of his strategy to create a socially abusive website that continues to exist. Nope. You choose to be the poor self filing lawsuits. You may not choose to be poor, although I would argue that you in some ways do, Melinda, because you're engaging in this type of behavior rather than working on literally any other project to make money. Open an OnlyFans, show pictures of your feet or whatever, and see if people will buy them. Try it. There's ways for you to become unpoor. Women are doing it all over the place. It's the new craze in the pandemic. Just shove various instruments in your body and take pictures of it with a mask on, and no one will even know it's you. You could be rich tomorrow. Have fun. And yes, big girls can participate. It's been evident over the entire time. Or you could do the other thing, which is just get a goddamn job, like basically the entire working class has done. Just get a job. Just try work. Like if you don't want to sell and exploit your own body for money, which is understandable and maybe even respectable, just get a job. Just try that. Go to a Culver's, go to a Walmart, go to an Aldi. Aldi pays really well compared to the rest of the market. Right now, you can make a pretty good living just about anywhere because they desperately need you. You can be out of government subsidies before you know it if you just put your damn mind to it. But you won't. You won't. He was banking on the plaintiff not being able to defend herself in court. You filed the lawsuit. He didn't file it. This is another disconnect from Melinda that has repeated itself throughout this entire litigation. She brought the lawsuit. She's not defending herself in court. She's going on the offense. She brought it. He didn't bring her to court and like, aha, I'm going to exploit the poor. Josh Moon is a poor. The man is fucking broke as far as I'm concerned. He's a poor just like her. As far as I know about his finances anyway, which, I mean, I could be wrong. Less poor than her. But that's not hard. This Gatorade is less poor than Melinda Scott. Let's see. If the defendant Moon, wants to attack members of society that don't have the capacity to hire legal representation, then he gets all the consequences of his own actions. What? That doesn't make any sense. This repeated false idea of victimization by defendant Moon, in which he seeks to not be accountable for his actions, is a repeated pattern of behavior displayed by defendant Moon in demonstrating he believes he should not be responsible for his own actions and is above the rules, including the rule of filing pleadings and papers on time. Nope, all of his filings have been on time because he's gotten permission from the court for any extensions that he's gotten. Again, this is we saw this in Vic's case too, where the court ruled that things were timely, and then people were saying he was late. It's like, he wasn't late. The court ruled it was timely. It's the opposite of late. That's just timely. This is Melinda's issue on all of this, is that she's arguing to the court who just found Moon not accountable for those actions. They don't require accountability. Deficiencies in Defendant Moon's motions. Defendant Moon's counsel lacks standing. Defendant Moon's counsel cites no case law supporting a legal foundation for an opposing counsel requesting a litigant pay an appeal bond. He doesn't need the case law. He has the actual civil procedure rule. There is no legal basis for his course of conduct except the rule on point. His motions appear in unnecessarily violation of Federal Rule 11. Nope. In the misuse of motions to delay, intimidate, and stall a plaintiff from exercising her constitutional right to appeal. Incorrect. Defendant Moon's allegations against the plaintiff void of any factual content. In his motion for an extension of time to file document, Defendant Moon, by counsel, states that plaintiff has occasionally admitted to questionable extra-legal or otherwise improper motives for this litigation, yet then proceeds to say that he doesn't have time to find the facts to support his allegation against the plaintiff. Yes, that is correct. There's a 1,000-page thread in which you have commented multiple times. They need to comb through it. They also need to comb through anywhere else you may have spoken about it, like Facebook or Instagram or Only Thoughts or wherever. It's not only absurd, it is also out of the bounds of the legal standards for the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. Absolutely not. What? This chick is too... I'm going to break. Firstly, plaintiff denies this allegation completely. Great. Guess what? They have time to prove it because the judge granted it. Secondly, every litigant is required to support their allegations with facts and motions. Yes, they're making a motion for extra time to put these facts together to the court. If they're unable to put the facts together for the court, then the court will deny their motion. It is both improper process and absurd to expect the litigant to not have to comply with that legal standard simply because they didn't have time. That's why they're asking for more time. It's two separate motions, you dummy. They don't have to prove the thing that they need more time for to prove in the other one. They're asking for more time to prove the other thing. The evidence is that there is a thread with over 1,000 pages. That means that there's something like 20,000 posts to sift through on that thread. That is the evidence. The other part that you made statements is not at issue in the motion for extension of time. Despite the time constraints on her very busy schedule. Oh, yes. Very, very busy. The plaintiff has been required to meet every legal standard required to participate in this case. You could have asked for an extension of time for literally anything. And the defendant and his counsel are not entitled to special treatment to not have to support their allegations with facts. Ask for an extension of time if you want one. Defendant Moon's motion lacking accurate facts. Oh, this is a good one. This is upside down. Holy shit. This is going to be tough. Defendant Moon, by counsel, stated in his motion for extension of time to file documents that the plaintiff previously appealed unsuccessfully. Yeah. The plaintiff only appealed a portion of two previously dismissed cases. The portions appealed by Plaintiff Scott were Fourth Amendment violations as a state actor and whether or not Plaintiff Scott adequately stated in her complaint if Joshua Moon was immune under CDA 230. But you weren't successful. You weren't successful. This is not me. Guys, I pulled, this is, look at this. This is directly from the court. It's not me turning it upside down. This is Melinda Scott mailing it in upside down or the court scanning it in. One of those two. Defendant Moon's motion fails to distinguish factors. Oh, God. Reading upside down and backwards is not easy, by the way. Defendant Moon's motion for an extension of time to file a document and his motion to require an appeal bond makes sweeping statements about Plaintiff Scott's prior lawsuits being dismissed. They were dismissed, all of them. Neither of these paragraphs distinguish between factors as to why those cases were dismissed. It doesn't matter, you dummy. They were factually accurate in that they were dismissed. None of the previous two cases filed by plaintiff Scott against Joshua Moon were for intentional infliction of emotional distress, as defendant's counsel bringing up those dismissals are irrelevant to this case, which is about IIED. Except the problem is you're using IIED as a scapegoat substitute for your lack of ability to file on the other issues, and you know it. That's why you did it. That's why you didn't include defamation and false light in this one, you dishonest liar. The court is not going to not see through your lies. You're not smarter than the judge. And my opinion of judges, Melinda, is very low. That puts my opinion of you through the fucking crust of the earth. 3, the second appeal that was dismissed was solely on the basis that plaintiff Scott did not include in her complaint a clear and concise statement demonstrating why defendant Moon was not immune under CDA section 230. Right. You just had a conclusory statement, not one supported by facts or law. That is not an issue in this case. Well, I mean, it might be. As plaintiff Scott clearly and without fail wrote a clear and concise paragraph demonstrating the defendant Moon is not immune under CDA section 230. 4, Judge Jones's opinion of 10/24/19, page 4, stated that a court is not required to recognize obscure or extravagant claims, defying the most concerted efforts to unravel them. The Court of Appeals upheld this because the complaint was not clear enough, with the plaintiff's legal writing skills improving over the last few years. This isn't an issue in this case. I'm done. Oh my God. No, I'm better at writing. They're clear now. They're clear now. They have to be, because I got better, didn't I? I gotta do a 1,500 like shot for this stream. So here I've switched. I was drinking the California Commie whiskey, and now I switched back to the Jack 27, which is a very, very good whiskey. Now that I'm past the upside down page, I got no problems. Prior dismissals irrelevant to this case. They're actually very relevant in what's going on right now. They were irrelevant to the dismissal of your case. That is correct. But they are very relevant to the fact that you are abusing the legal process and doing so in form of pauperis, which means you're relying on the taxpayer to pay your legal bills, which means you might have to justify your actions. There's no Fourth Amendment violation brought up in this case. It was stupid in the other case, you idiot. Further, the plaintiff has clearly demonstrated in her complaint that Joshua Moon is not qualified for immunity under CDA 230, so there's no way for the appeals court to dismiss upon this issue. Oh, there's a way. Trust me, there's a way. Plaintiff has overcome pleading difficulty. She's got this weird lettering scheme going on here. Okay. With the plaintiff's legal writing skills improving over the last few years, deficiencies in prior complaints, which led to the appeals court ruling that the writing was too vague, have not been an issue here. She's like, I've been getting practice. You have record of all the practice. Please don't pay attention to the record of all the practice. That is why Judge Jones, after reviewing the record, ordered a default on the well-written complaint, and on the order of August 31st, 2021 is void of any indication that the complaint is vague or obscure. Oh my God. Plaintiff has overcome CDA 230 immunity issue that resulted in her previous lawsuit being dismissed. The plaintiff has clearly demonstrated in her complaint that Joshua Moon is not qualified for immunity under CDA section 230. Therefore, there's no way for the appeals court to dismiss upon this issue. Oh, again, there is a way, which is the reason it was previously dismissed. Refusal of Supreme Court to grant her petition irrelevant. Defendant's counsel brings up the fact that the Supreme Court did not grant her petitions in prior cases. Supreme Court only grants about 1% of cases. They do not grant or deny on the basis of merit. They do, actually. They do. That's part of the That's part of the discussion. Maybe not the merit that she's talking about, but there is a merit system to the Supreme Court. They take a qualitative evaluation of the case and determine if they want to hear it, if they want to expend valuable Supreme Court resources on it. They grant or deny on the basis of time and ability to handle caseload. Nope. That would imply that the first come, first served cases would be the ones that they grant on. That's not true, you dummy. The website of the Supreme Court states they cannot cure every social injustice because they don't have the time. That is true. Refusal of the Supreme Court to grant a petition, not a ruling in defendant Moon's favor. No, it was. It actually was. It's a de facto affirmation of the lower court's decision. What are you talking about? Defendant Moon did not receive a ruling in his favor from the Supreme Court. The petition was simply denied, which means they agreed with the appeals court. At the end of the day, that's a denial of a petition for cert, is that they agreed with the appeals court. It's an affirmation by inaction. Rule 54 does not entitle defendant for another claim to attorney's fees. Rule 54 states that a claim can be brought before the entry of judgment. That time is already passed. Oh, God. Defendant is not entitled to a new motion asking for attorney's fees. Again, let's see. Fed Rule Civ Pro 54. Let's take a look. Let's see if she's right. Maybe she is. Judgment, as used in these rules, indicates a decree in any order from which an appeal lies. So we have that. An appeal is going. So judgment on multiple claims or involving multiple parties. We don't have that. I don't think. Well, when an action presents more than one claim for relief, whether as a claim, counterclaim, cross-claim, or third-party claim, or when multiple parties are involved, the court may direct entry of final judgment as to one or more, but fewer than all claims or parties, blah, blah, blah. This isn't really relevant here. Demand for judgment, relief to be granted. A default judgment must not differ in kind from or exceed an amount what is demanded in the pleadings. Every other final judgment should grant the relief to which the party is entitled, even that party has not demanded that relief in its pleadings. Okay. Where are we? Melinda, what are you fucking talking about? A claim can be brought before entry of judgment. So she doesn't actually... Oh, here, attorney's fees. Claim to be by motion. A claim for attorney's fees and related non-taxable expenses must be made by motion unless the substantive law requires those fees to be proved at trial as an element of damages. Okay. Timing contents of motion. Unless a statute or court order provides otherwise, motion must be filed no later than 14 days after the entry of judgment. Are we? Is she an idiot? I mean, she's an idiot, but it's pretty clear. Specify the judgment in the statute, rule, or other grounds entitling the movement. State the amount sought. Disclose. Is the word before in the rule? Okay, so proceedings. Subject to Rule 23.8, the court must, on a party's request, give an opportunity for adversary submissions on the motions. Court may decide issues of liability for fees before receiving submissions on the value. She's completely like before. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here's the only thing. Here's the before the entry of a judgment. Otherwise, any order or other decision, however designated, that adjudicates fewer than all the claims or the rights of liabilities of fewer than all the parties does not end the action as to any of the claims or parties and may be revised at any time before the entry of a judgment adjudicating all the claims. She's literally stupid. Literally stupid. This is completely unrelated to the attorney's fees section. I mean, This is one of the dumbest arguments I've ever seen. She correctly puts a quote from the rule in there, but it's not related to this at all. I hope the judge makes fun of her. No evidence that Defendant Moon pays his attorney's fees. Irrelevant, actually. Defendant Moon has presented no evidence. That would be done at the hearing if they win the fees on how much they're awarded. has presented no evidence whatsoever that he even has paid attorney's fees, as mentioned in the prior pleadings. We saw the same tactic with Vic, right? They were awarded fees despite the fact that there was no particular evidence that Vic had paid or that they had paid any fees. You don't have to prove that they paid fees, just that they were billed. That's the right. But that happens later. Plaintiff has adequately conveyed that Defendant Moon ran a fundraising campaign for his business in order to pay his attorney's fees by his subscribers. That's okay. He still paid those. Shocking how that works. Defendant Moon has presented no evidence whatsoever to demonstrate that fees were paid from his bank account to an attorney. Doesn't have to. Defendant Moon lacks facts to comply with the legal standard of excusable neglect. Memorandum of law citing the legal standard for requesting an extension of time is attached to this response. Defendant Moon disappearance, not good cause. The good cause is whatever the court says. It's just whatever the court decides to be good cause. Defendant Moon has frivolous reasons for requesting an extension of time. Defendant Moon, by counsel, claims that his client is difficult to reach. The court already disagreed with you. However, Joshua Moon posted online on kiwiforums.net on August 31st his thoughts about the order and judgment of August 31st. And suddenly, after filing your notice of appeal, the link disappeared. Joshua Moon had notice and knowledge that the order of judgment was entered. He had personal responsibility to contact his attorney, except that people have differing schedules, and he may not be able to easily contact his attorney during business hours. Plaintiff has had to multitask and juggle all of her personal responsibilities and meet deadlines imposed on her by this court. Could have asked for an extension at any time. Time and again, which has held her strictly to the rules at every turn. You never asked for an extension. You would have gotten it. Defendant Moon is not entitled to special treatment. Defendant Moon's counsel has failed to demonstrate good cause for an extension of time. Good cause for an extension of time is illness, death of a loved one, natural disaster, hospitalization, and the like. Notice the lack of citation. Vacation. Vacation is literally good cause in civil court all the time. All the time, especially if the vacation was previously scheduled. Incompetence, laziness, or discomfort with the situation are not valid reasons for extensions of time. That's actually, all of those are wrong. Those could all be valid reasons. Defendant Moon's, Melinda, you could file for incompetence extensions constantly. Defendant Moon's counsel has presented no case law supporting vacation or inability to reach one's client as a good cause for an extension of time. Oh my God. Defendant Moon's counsel seeking special treatment. Once again, just as Defendant Moon wants to bend the rules for extra time to file pleadings for frivolous reasons like wanting to go on vacation, which was a frivolous reason he stated in his prior motions. Once again, Defendant Moon, by counsel, has no valid reason for asking for an extension of time. He has pointed to no circumstance beyond his control, like an illness, death, or natural disaster, for seeking an extension of time. Motions for an extension of time are only permissible for excusable neglect. Nope. What are you talking about? I'm not even going to look up that case, and I can tell you she got it completely wrong. Completely wrong. Motions for extension of time are not only permissible for excusable neglect. Literally any scheduling error on earth that is not neglect, like just, oh, this doesn't work, I'm going to be in another hearing, isn't excusable neglect. The court sets times. They don't always confer with counsel. She's so fucking dumb. The defendant has pointed to absolutely no factual reason demonstrating excusable neglect. Wow. Equitable tolling is appropriate when, but only when, extraordinary circumstances beyond the petitioner's control prevented him from complying with the statutory time limit. We're not talking about equitable tolling. Here, defendant by counsel has demonstrated no facts showing that his need for more time was for extraordinary circumstances. What are you? You're talking about something else. Oh, no! Fucking hell. How did she get some of these upside down? Multiples. Issue of appeal. The fact remains that plaintiff does not need to defend her right to appeal just because the defendant's counsel is not cognizant of procedural and legal issues at the trial court level. No attorney or judge has a legal right to ask the appellant for a brief of what will be in their appeal. There is not a basis in law for defendant's counsel to demand this from the plaintiff. That's not actually true. And notice that you have no citation to back it up. Notwithstanding, in order to protect her constitutional rights, the plaintiff will demonstrate that there are plenty of issues on appeal given in concise language, as she is not even legally obligated to reveal the contents of her appeal yet, and her appeal will fully outline in depth the basis, laws, and issues stated below. Judge Jones's duty to recuse himself. What Control-Alt-Arrow key does not do anything. There is a rotate. Okay, I found that. But it's going to unrotate the rest of it, so I'll have to rotate it back. Judge Jones's duty to recuse himself. Judge James P. Jones entered in an order and judgment on August 30th. However, pursuant to federal law 28 U.S.C. 455, recusal is mandatory when impartiality might reasonably be questioned. It wasn't reasonable, sweetie. Any justice, judge, or magistrate of the United States shall disqualify himself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might be reasonably questioned. Under 455b1, a judge shall disqualify himself when he has a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party. Plaintiff filed a motion to recuse and supporting a reply. This recusal and further reply outline the ways in which the judge's impartiality could reasonably be questioned based upon facts and based upon gender bias. In the motion to recuse, plaintiff Scott brought up two additional issues. She also attached exhibits from defendant John Doe 3 telling the plaintiff that Judge James P. Jones had conspired together with plaintiff Wise County Department of Social Services. The plaintiff James P. Jones is not a plaintiff Wise County Department of Social Services. He's the judge and they're the defendant, you fucking moron. James P. Jones had a judicial duty to deny what John Doe 3 had told the plaintiff was untrue. Since harassing a plaintiff during litigation is illegal, he had a duty to validate an unsubstantiated and irrational claim against him. He had to. Canon 2B of the Judicial Code of Conduct requires that a judge should neither lend the prestige of the judicial office to advance the private interests of the judge. This is like judging on a company that the judge owns. Or other, nor convey or permit others to convey the impression that they are in a special position to influence the judge. Yes, the judge is obligated to affirmatively react to every lunacy statement made. You could just shut down all the courts because everybody could just email every defendant on earth and say that I corrupted the judge. That's all you'd have to say. And the judges would legally be required to respond to every single one of those things that happen, if that were true. John Doe 3 was permitted to convey that certain defendants are in a special position to influence the judge. This part of the motion to recuse was not addressed. The third issue raised in the motion to recuse was whether or not there's a conflict of interest in the case because of a Freemason membership shared by Counsel Hardin and Judge Jones. Uh-oh! The Masons are coming. They're going to build buildings. Hardin and Jones out there laying bricks. Oh boy. Canon 2B of the Judicial Code of Conduct requires that a judge should not allow family, social, political, financial, or other relationships to influence judicial conduct or judgment. He also had a judicial duty to deny or admit that there's a conflict of interest between defendant's counsel. He denied it. He denied it when he refused to recuse himself, you dummy. Mr. Hardin and himself due to Freemason Lodge connections. This portion of the... Listen, these globalists are out here. They're having these Freemason orgies. They're wearing robes. They're touching nipples. They got snakes. They got kids locked up in the closets. We can't deal with this. Globalists got to go. Lizard people, potbelly vampire goblins coming out of all the robes, out of the woodwork to defend and impugn the good character of Melinda Scott. He also had a judicial duty to deny or admit that there is a conflict of interest between defendant's counsel, Mr. Hardin, and himself due to Freemason Lodge connections. This portion of the motion to recuse was not addressed because it was stupid. Even these two additional issues aside, Judge James P. Jones had a judicial duty to step down from the case and recuse himself because the plaintiff clearly demonstrated a reasonable question of his impartiality. Correction of bias. The main 4 factual issues brought up in Plaintiff Scott's motion to recuse were A, not applying rules of service property. Wrong. You got that one wrong, Melinda. You're wrong. It's embarrassing for you. Not applying the legal standard of constructive notice properly towards the defendant. Again, wrong. Very, very wonderful that you've used these words, constructive and notice, but actual notice is actually required for service under the rules of civil procedure. And refusing discovery for the plaintiff after permitting it with no explanation of law to support a denial after permitting it. He didn't refuse discovery. You had the opportunity to conduct discovery. You always did. And then you lost the case. So then it was over. Again, wrong. After the motion to recuse was filed, Judge Jones then ruled on the case. His making an opinion on the case demonstrates that he decided and upheld that service was valid. Yep. The service that was accepted subsequently that Josh Moon consented to with his counsel, even if this can be construed as a correction of Judge Jones's bias towards the plaintiff. It wasn't a correct bias toward the plaintiff. That's good for you, Melinda. You're the plaintiff, but it wasn't a correction. You see, service was accepted by Joshua Moon once he retained counsel. Wasn't a correction at all, you dummy. It was a subsequent act. And certainly anyone should be permitted opportunity to correct themselves. The order and judgment then resurfaced his bias once again with an abuse of discretion. Wrong. Abuse of discretion. She's on issue number 27. Abuse of discretion by Judge Jones, an order and judgment dated August 31st. Judge James P. Jones, not James E. Jones. Order and judgment dated August 31st, which resulted in a dismissal, is an abuse of discretion for ruling on a case without permitting a hearing for the plaintiff to present testimony and evidentiary facts. Nope. Not an abuse of discretion, not even close. Abuse of discretion appears to be tied to the plaintiff's motion to recuse. Nope. A judge has exercised an abuse of discretion when his or her decision is not based on law, is arbitrary, based on bias, or is unconscionable. None of that happened here, you fucking moron. Procedural issues on appeal. The appeals court should take note of the fact that Judge Jones negligently or intentionally sabotaged the plaintiff's ability to serve John Does 1 through 3 and Jane Doe 2 because he did not respond to Plaintiff Scott's request for immediate discovery in her complaint in order to serve John Does 1 through 3 and Jane Doe 1 in a timely manner. He would have granted you the extension if you had any basis for serving them. You were not dismissed on the Does because you didn't serve them. You were dismissed because you didn't read the case law. He cited the case as to why the dismissal against the one plaintiff or defendant amounted to dismissal amongst all of the defendants. In his order and judgment, Judge Jones dismissed plaintiff's case of IIED while weighing only the malicious CPS call as the reason for IIED. His order and judgment completely omits all other facts in paragraph 65 through 80 describing actions by defendant Joshua Moon, defendants John Does and Jane Does, which led Plaintiff Scott to file a case of IIED. Judge Jones neglected to address these paragraphs. Civilized society does not tolerate malicious CPS calls. But you just said he addressed the CPS call, you fucking idiot. So much so that it is a crime. It is unconscionable that a judge would dismiss with indifference to a crime. Civilized society does not tolerate social abuse through internet posting. It literally does every single minute of every single day. Plaintiff has plenty of evidentiary facts to present in a hearing to demonstrate that civilized society does not tolerate the type of content on Kiwi Farms. Only when you got like naked pictures of fat people. Judge Jones's decision to rule on the merits of the complaint, uphold that the default entered on November 6, 2020 was valid. What? So then entitle the plaintiff to a hearing. No, a hearing on the damages in a default judgment is not a hearing on the merits. You lost on the merits because that lawsuit was vacated. It was undone. Plaintiff was not even heard in hearing to present evidentiary facts and testimony as previously ordered in the default order. You're misunderstanding what facts. You were supposed to go show how you were damaged. That was all. God, I almost wish they would have done it. Both the federal rules of civil procedure and the judicial code of conduct require a fair opportunity for plaintiff to be heard. You had your opportunity. It was in your pleadings and you failed. Look up Iqbal and Twombly, you fucking dummy. This ruling upon the merits of the complaint without a hearing is a demonstration of bias against the plaintiff. Nope. As well as a decision outside the confines of law and the federal rules of civil procedure. It's got a storied history in case law. Iqbal, Twombly, Bell South. Go read them. In deciding to rule upon the merits of plaintiff Scott's complaint, Judge Jones demonstrated that he upheld that service was valid. No. The default was therefore valid. No. Literally no. This raises the issue of why plaintiff was then arbitrarily denied the opportunity to serve discovery requests for Joshua Moon. You weren't denied discovery requests. The judge said, I can't give you permission to do discovery. You just do it. So discovery is not incumbent upon the judge's request. You just give the discovery request. Dismissal with prejudice by Judge Jones is a denial of the plaintiff's constitutional rights to file. Nope. The plaintiff still maintains constitutional right of access to the courts, including but not limited to the right to file an appropriation case as the statute of limitations has not expired. No legal basis for denying the plaintiff's right to file. Actually, there could be, because there is an issue of issue and claim preclusion where you should have brought the issue when it was first discovered. When you brought other issues to the table, you might actually waive the right to bring those issues if they were present previously. Without citing a single fact, Judge Jones' order arbitrarily labeled the plaintiff's filings as meritless. That's because there wasn't a single fact to cite. Legal standard for federal courts that a plaintiff's pleadings and facts should be accepted as true on their face. Your pleadings and facts were accepted as true. There was just nothing that had any merit. Therefore, the plaintiff's complaints cannot be said to be meritless. Wrong. In evaluating a complaint, the court accepts all well-pled facts. That's an important qualifier. Construes those facts in light most favorable to the plaintiff. The omission of the paragraph in prior lawsuits demonstrating that defendant Moon is not immune under section CDA 230 does not make a pleading meritless. Without citing a single fact, the order of August 31st, 2021 arbitrarily labeled the plaintiff's filings as repetitive. This is arbitrary decision-making? No. Therefore, an abuse of discretion? No. It's not even factual in the slightest bit? No. Plaintiff filed for defamation, false negative light, and Fourth Amendment violations in former suits. It had nothing to do with the IIED, which is literally based on defamation and false light. You're just lying about what it is. Further, Judge Jones neglected to incorporate a fact stated in paragraph 68 of the plaintiff's complaint that the information on kiwifarms.net evolved. So you're going ahead and now defeating your own argument by saying that it is actually the same thing, but it got different. Clearly and obviously, if information on a website aimed at causing an injury toward the plaintiff evolves, so too will the cause of action that the plaintiff takes, including but not limited to filing lawsuits. Order of August 31st, 2021 states that the plaintiff speculating that defendant Moon contributed to the malicious CPS call when the paragraphs number 65 to 80, plaintiff's complaints say otherwise, lay out the factual basis for saying that Joshua Moon contributed to the malicious CPS call. Judge ignored those facts. Based on what? Based on what? How did he contribute to them? Saying he contributed isn't actually saying that he contributed. You have to say how. How do you contribute to a phone call? Did he dial the number? Did he jerk off the person who was on the phone while they were talking? Did he pay for the cell phone? How did he contribute to it? The order of August 31st did not address constitutional violations by defendant Moon addressed in other parts of the plaintiff's complaint. Contents of the appeal. As demonstrated above, there are plenty of issues to appeal. Oh, I feel so sorry for the appeals court. All these issues presented here will be duly noted in plaintiff Scott's appeal. If this judge has any sense, he'll grant the appeal bond. He'll look at this and go, okay, this is a good reason to do the appeal bond. Fuck her. If she wants to bring all these issues and waste the appeals court's time based on nonsense, all right, she can do that. Put up the bond. No legal basis for requiring an appeal bond. There's no legal basis for retroactively removing a prior granted petition to support to proceed in form of pauperis. No, you're not removing the informa pauperis. You're just requiring that the taxpayer money be well-founded. Defendant by counsel has cited no case law supporting his conclusion that a district court can retroactively deny a petition to proceed in form of right over her head. Having been granted a petition to proceed in forma pauperis, the plaintiff is granted by federal law the absolute right to proceed without paying an appeal bond. Nope. And notice you keep saying you have no case law, but you have no case law on these assertions. Wherefore, because the defendant's motion for an extension of time to file document and his motion to require appeal bond have absolutely no basis in law, both motions should be denied and dismissed. Melinda Scott. There you go. There we go. We have done our duty on the first Melinda Scott document. I'm going to be done with that. Powered through that. Let's do super chats and then let's go watch a movie together. We're going to find something good to watch tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be, I think, an anime themed episode with Anime Outsiders. Maybe another guest. I'm not quite sure yet, but it will be a little bit different, a little more chill and conversational, maybe a little less law, maybe not. I don't know. We'll figure out what to talk about, but Anime Outsiders will be on and we will be having some sort of anime themed discussion, which I know will piss off like 8 million people, but there you go. Okay. Here we go. I stop reading the chat. Norm McDonald says, when I die, I want to be cremated, my ashes spread eagle and fucked hard like a fucking real tramp. Okay. That one guy says gouging is actually helping and saving lives, by the way. High prices are a signal that more of goods are needed. They get people to bring more goods from further away when they are needed the most. The law is wrong and just some guys' ethics are uninformed. Learn economics. Well, it's a lot to ask some people. Gouging also controls the severity and duration of price spikes. Soon as you sell an overpriced good, other people want in, show up, and the price drops. If your price is too high, you don't sell enough and lose money. Applies to nearly every type of good. Yeah, I know. That one guy continues. 2 more from him. Says, if too few actors can control the supply of something like discontinued collectibles, that's actually not a market by the economic decision. Thankfully, pretty much nothing we actually need is so rare that nobody can make or find more of it. The one situation where someone can actually deny you access to necessities you're willing to pay for is when the government gets to decide if you get it or not. Just some guy's solution is the exact thing he claims to want to prevent: government seizing your stuff. Yep. No, nailed it. John McCain's Ghost says, War. Come on, my friends. Fight with me. I can only do the Hitler hail. That's as high as my shoulders go. Okay. That glioblastoma, though. That one guy, I was in the Hanoi Hilton. That one guy says most things the left claims you are being denied by evil market exploitation are actually being made artificially more scarce by government regulations. Jobs, healthcare, and housing, just to name a few, are all more scarce due to misguided government controls. Just some goy says, so the AIDS commie is against exploitation. He says using electronics to produce his videos, most likely built in China, with exploited child slave labor, or drinks his coffee with beans harvested by child/slave labor. People like him only repeat slogans. That one guy says, now, if just some guy had any idea how these things actually worked, maybe he wouldn't be for the government kicking down your door and stopping you from saving lives by gouging. He could replace his emotions with ethics that account for how real economies operate. Scarvy the Strange says, I don't want to start hating just some guy. Don't hate him. He's got a bad argument, that's all. But he's arguing from a place of such emotion as to start dehumanizing others. His thinking dangerously emotional and not tactical. That's how the commies get you. There's no reason to hate or even dislike just some guy. He just doesn't understand what a free market capitalist thinks about. And I will pithily and blithely say, because he's a commie. It's okay. It's fine. I don't know why he's so offended by the term. He wants centralized planning in his economy. He just only wants so much of it. Well, I don't want full centralized. I just want centralized planning to kick in at some point that I determine to be correct. Oh, okay. So you want to control everybody's capital. Got it. I've never heard of a communist who wanted that before. That one guy says, lots of ignorant folks like just some guy go to business school every year thinking they're going to prove to everyone how evil capitalism is, then take one economics course and find out everything they've been told about the markets is wrong. Just some guy might try it out. And that one guy also says, as an aside, I do think you can do wrong things without knowing they're wrong, but it's just not without some context. Maybe some values are implicit in human actions. Maybe some are just largely accepted. Moral philosophies ride a lot on this type of context. Yeah. Yeah, people can do the wrong thing plenty and not intend to. Mr. Security says, speaking of water on your land, one time my buddy was fishing in a public access river that happened to cut through somebody's backyard. He was legally allowed to be there because he entered through the water access, so the game warden had to go get fucked. Yeah, if there's a public water access and public water, riparian rights are a very interesting and complex thing that I'm pretty sure the overwhelming majority of people don't understand because they don't need to. Mandy says, oh, Nick, you choose cinnamon buns. Should I dust them with pistachio, orange zest, or leave them naked? Leave them naked, in my opinion. And then smother them. Yes, that's good. Mario Carter. Wait, no, I read that one. Let's see. All-Star Apologist says, I'm not feeling the haircut, homie. Well, it's not getting undone. Rick, the slack-paced lawyer, says, y'all still doing FlashCast. P.S. Go deeper on this. I should be on FlashCast this Saturday. I don't know about just some guy or not. Which is fine. If we're on there, I'm happy to do this over reasoned and measured responses, right? As far as I was concerned, the argument with just some guy was done. I was not bringing up the argument to further dump on just some guy. And again, if he took it that way, literal, sincere apologies. I was just using it as a recent example in discussions of liberty where I disagreed with someone. I found them instructive. Eldon Bainling says, north, like the top of your head. No, okay. Not applicable says, funny how nobody defends rights that bother them. Rick, the slack-paced lawyer, says, I dislike your cut, G, but like the stream. Hey, thanks. Angry Bellsprout says, sent an email about the AF virtual town hall happening tomorrow and some other gripes I've super chatted about in the past. Okay, cool. I think today or whatever, I think Quentin Flynn's hearing is today. I don't know what time. Angry Bellsprout says, no, Base Crocodile says, Occupy Dems tweeted for landlords to evict the unvaxxed. Yep, they did. They did. Fatty McFatterson says, loving the alt-right haircut, keep the grift alive. Wolfgang Deo says, what is a PPP and surfer? Cutting my life into pieces. Oh, no. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to send you down that rabbit hole. Frisky Django says, pray for us Canucks. As of tomorrow, we now have to present vaccine papers wherever we go. Papers, please. Papers, please. Where's the star? Where's the star on your clothing so we can see it? Nicole Waldrum says, RGE, I stand with Bullet. Vienna waits for you, says, a small contribution to your next bottle of whiskey. Here's to swimming with bow-legged women. Cheers, Nick. Hey, thank you, Vienna. Eldon Bainling says, can you go get Lawcat? If not, chat won't hit like. No. Organized Arizona Politics says, it may take me a minute to get it up. You seem a bit too comfortable with that statement. I am getting old. Eldon Bainling says, here's your criticism, Boomer. Your haircut sucks. Nicole Waldrum, welcome to Super Lawyer status. Thank you. Welcome. Mean Sarton says, 5 seconds in, this guy is out cancering Vouch. Funny Valentine 2024 says, hell yeah, an EFAP stream. Wait, where's Mahler? No, this is only going to be a couple hours. I didn't have 19 hours to spend with Mahler on it. Not applicable says, man, YouTube is boring these days. Just some guy's videos, a snooze fest. Talk about not knowing enough to have anything to say. This is who 180,000 people listen to. Co-IV for you says, imagine a responsible capitalist who solves the problem by not letting a bad actor into your market and not needing the government to do it for you. It's weird. That's how it tends to work. Mario Carter 13 says, eminent domain is totally capitalist, bro. Abubba 22 says, I wonder what your thoughts on Chinese patriots buying masks and sanitizer in the U.S., shipping them back to China before the pandemic news breaks. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why they're buying it. It doesn't matter to me if they're for sale. They're for sale at the market price. If someone comes up and offers the price, then the seller has the right to sell it. I don't see the issue. I mean, does it make those actors bad or evil or something? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough about them. But see, that's the thing with property rights, right? And that's why it's a question of right and a question of principle. The evil person buying in the market has the same impact as the non-evil person buying in the market. That's it. If you buy a gun to keep in your house, or if you buy a gun to shoot someone, it has nothing to do with the sale of the gun being good or bad. I don't know how to get into it beyond that. Vienticus Prime says eBay is not the market. Amazon is not the market. One entity does not constitute the entirety. They are actors in a market, in this instance, controllers. Yep. Not applicable says hit that thumbs up button, commies. Woo! Roof Korea in the base says need to extend the threat of the bullet to the feds, politicians, bankers, and CEOs. Klein Smith walked and never held accountable. A 40C 308 fixes it. Amateur Ant says the sweet and sour sniffles didn't slow production down. It was the government's overreaction that slowed it, and why it's still hard to find certain things to this day. Well, we didn't need to get into that. My whole point was that no one anticipated that there wouldn't be Purell on the shelves within 2 days. Or toilet paper. Geodes says, in the voice of Ralph from the Ralph Retort, now wait a minute, JSG, no! Ayn Rand says, isn't ad hominem used in Pozole, or is that the rapper? I don't know what that reference is. Nicole Waldrum says, I stand with Bullet. The I see no evil says, Nick, you can torch his argument to a crisp, but don't lose a chance for you two to be friends. I got no personal beef with just some guy. You two are more similar than you know. Don't lose that chance to make peace. Again, I have no issues with him. No personal issues with him. If we were on a show tomorrow, I'd be 100% cordial. And I don't take it personally that he made a bad argument. Crusader Saracen says Liberty Prime online, communist detected. Sentinel Rex says exploitation is totally legal. Heard of the entertainment industry or any other job that requires labor. Employment is exploitation by its nature. Spec says, how is it any different than selling a super rare comic book? It's not. Dripping Not So Handsome Jack says donating stuff, others stuff to you willingly. Communism. Unwillingly. Yes. Donating other stuff to you unwillingly is communism. Sentinel Rex says you have the right to life. Nobody has the right to survive. Correct. Mario Carter 13 says we went to war with Japan to secure the PS5. Crusader Saracen says I haven't been able to buy an Xbox yet. To war I go. He also says just some guy, despite his condescension, doesn't seem to realize that the individual is the greatest minority. Individual rights are always paramount. Uriah Wright says that's something fucking Vouch would say. Emperor's Rest says they made an amendment for what you did. Just some guy. Wrecked. Not applicable says just some guy to just some guy. Gotcha. Nick, wait, what? Tyrannosaurus Rex says he should change his name to just some idiot. Kuramithos says, did just some guy just try to out-lawyer a lawyer? Since he started his argument with a straw man argument, his whole argument is full of holes and half-truths and makes him sound more and more like a commie. Avaheim says, if just some vagina had his way, then the drug wouldn't exist. The people he says would die anyway. Well, again, when you're willing to say, and I don't know if he holds this position. He doesn't seem to, but it is the logical extension. If you must be required to sell at a specific price, logic would dictate that you must be required to sell at a specific need. Since the specific price is based on need, then by extension, hoarding would be disallowed, which means if you bought Daraprim or owned Daraprim and were unwilling to provide it at any price, it should be confiscated from you forcefully. That is the logical outcome of that argument. And to try and say otherwise, I think is either dishonest or just short-sighted or myopic. Because if the principle is that, well, we have to give it to people based on their need, then that need doesn't terminate just because no one's selling it. And I have a hard time believing that just some guy, based on how he argued this entire thing, would be okay if the person just went and bought all the Purell and kept it for himself. Anyway, I don't know. Behind says, P.S. The reporter says she doesn't know about chess or wine because she is of the people and poor, and he is rich and evil. Reporters are not people. Snuggle Struggle says, Martin S. was going to be given a pass with a fine, not charged. He instead pointed to his actions being the norm, didn't submit, and pissed off the judge. He also pissed off Congress. And actually, I was watching his congressional hearing, and Trey Gowdy, who I normally like, acted like an absolute fucking cockbag in that hearing. And he misrepresented the legal standard for Fifth Amendment defenses in a very slimy attempt. So did Jason Chaffetz, which is a reminder that just because some politicians do good and funny and memey things sometimes doesn't mean they are still politicians. And at the end of the day, their conduct can still be despicable. Super Iron Bob says, so just some guy fell for an ad/PR blitz from the insurance company, but this is another reason why all three of those industries are evil. Eldon Bainling says, how are you able to sit and listen to disingenuous hacks like just some guy and rebut them without wanting to jump off a cliff? Why are you such a hero, Nick? I'm not. I'm just an asshole. Shadow Goff says, just some guy's voice sounds like a robot. I know he's trying to sound calm and in control, but he can't. How he comes off condescending, also insulting others. Half-eaten hooker says, if you can't decide whether you're for Nick or just some guy, then you ain't black. Marsupial Gamer says, well, this just became an insane litany of far-left narratives and non sequiturs. Sheesh. Mario Carter 13 says, Nick, stop. He's already dead. Passable Gamer says, bank notice to just some guy alert. Your straw man account is significantly overdrawn. Not applicable says, just some guy doesn't know much worth listening to, apparently. Again, just on this issue, his other stuff, that's in his wheelhouse. This just isn't. Wolfgang Deo says, so if you were to bill just some guy for your time, how much? We're pushing into we're coming up on 4 hours here. We're pushing into the $1,200 range. Fo Chung says, I think I'll listen to the lawyer. Yorick says, fat shaming works, 135 to 190 in 3 months. I think you mean 235 to 190 in 3 months. Need more motivation for the last 15 to go. Well, get up and go, you fatso. Stop sitting around like a slob. God, you're disgusting. Cave Kingdom says, Chris Chan trial starts tomorrow, Raggets. Please, please, please get us the transcripts. I'll see what I can do. Stargate 404 says, I think things started to go wrong with FDR. Closest thing to dictatorship we got, and we ended up with unconstitutional administrative state. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Wolfgang Deo says, where's Eldon Bainling at? Been what, a month now? He's in this chat. Stargate 404 says, off topic, Citadel, Games Workshop, or Vallejo. Those are Army Painter. Says, I've been wanting to switch, but they're about the same price, and seems Games Workshop has more pigment. Not sure, though. Thoughts? I like Citadel paints. Those are Army Painter, and it was easy to buy a big pack of them all at once. That's why I got them. Although there's a really good video out there on how to make all the colors you need with just 3 paints. So in theory, you could just buy big bottles of the same 3 pigments from Games Workshop. But Amateur Ant says, will you send your brown eye pick for Anna to paint? Yes, I will. Just like Robbie Rectum. Amateur Ant says, it would have been cheaper for Moon to hire a hitman to make this disappear. Texas Red says, Carl Jobst has been formally sued by Billy Mitchell. Oh, I got to get Carl back on now, for sure. I already wanted him back on, but man, insanity. Gummy says, how much to pre-order a Gay Station 5? $50 trillion. It's very exclusive. And if you don't get one, you'll die. and I control all of the stock. Mr. Leon says, hey, Nick, been away for a bit. Just wanted to share that I'm getting married soon. Hey, congrats, man. Very proud of you. Amateur Ant says, don't bring the Melinda lawsuit up ever again. No one important says, wish me good luck, Nick. Callie, slave here. I am now carrying around the I Got the Poke app on my phone. E-papers already started, and we are going to become France and Australia too. Send help. I wish I could help you, brother. Good luck. Ben Frail says, WTF happened to Justine DeMond's terrorist jogger murderers conviction being tossed? What's going on in Minnesota? It was something I've actually talked about. I'm going to try and put a video out on it tomorrow if I can. But it requires a danger of others, and she was the only one in danger, which is a nonsensical ruling. And the third-degree murder conviction should have stood, in my opinion, but the Supreme Court disagrees. Crusader Saracen says, I'm not taking pie from you. I'm giving pie to me. And Suck It says, late night General Milley take, treason. I don't know what else to say. Treason. You have a commander-in-chief, and contacting a maybe not enemy of the state, if we're being charitable, maybe just a neutral other state, and undermining your commander-in-chief is treason. You have different rules than a citizen. You are an officer of the military, and you do not get to do that. So I say treason, mutiny, insubordination. Amateur Ant says, we have a collapsing government for multiple reasons. The more the politicians and elite squeeze citizens, the more I want to bust out guns blazing and make it collapse even quicker and rise like a phoenix with a better, more free government. And that is all, y'all. Thank you for joining me. Mario Carter 13 says, Millie should ride feminist boy to glass Beijing. So thank you all for hanging out with me. Sorry, this went really long on the Just Some Guy stuff, but I wanted to be thorough and address every single point that was made or attempted to be made in the most coherent and cogent fashion possible. And that is hopefully it was instructive on how to dismantle an argument, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I will see you guys over on Twitch. If not, I will see you tomorrow for an anime themed show of some sort. I don't know exactly what the subjects are going to be, but we'll be talking a little bit of anime with Anime Outsiders, and maybe another guest, not positive. Catch you guys soon. It also is Thursday, so you never know. Maybe we'll talk about Vic stuff. Catch you guys soon. Have a good night. Peace.
Your Honor, I'm pretty sure we have a mistrial here, sir.
I'm gonna mistrial my foot up your ass. You don't shut up.